Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for our regular Board of Directors meeting. At this time, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Julie Bocanegra. I'm the board president. The time is now 5:32, and under Governor Inslee's Proclamation 2028, in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, temporarily suspends portions of the Open Public Meeting Act. The proclamation requires that all attendance at an open public meeting not take place in person but occur remotely, including the board directors and the public. Our meeting this evening is conducted via Zoom audio webinar. At this time, I'd like to ask for a roll to confirm the attendees. Vice President Victoria Bradford. Here. Director Rob Perkins.
Here.
Director Jenny Grunwald.
Here.
Director Rachel Rogers. Is Rachel with us? I thought I saw her. Oh, is that here?
Here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Superintendent Mike Merlino.
Here.
Administrative Assistant Lori Stroll. Here. Thank you, everyone. So at this time, I would like to recite the Pledge of Allegiance before our meeting begins. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. So we'll begin. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda this evening?
This director.
That we adopt the agenda.
Jenny, was that you?
Rob said it. I'll second.
Okay, so Rob, you made a motion? Director Perkins?
Yes, I moved.
Okay. Jenny?
Second.
Second. All right. So all in favor, say aye. I'll begin. Aye. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
And Rachel?
Aye.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next is our board consent agenda. Next on our agenda. So again, we'll take a motion to accept.
I move that we accept the board consent agenda.
And that's Jenny?
Yes, sorry, Director Grunwald.
Director Rogers, seconds.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. It's an aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
And Rachel?
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, next up is the superintendent consent agenda. So again, we'll entertain a motion to accept the superintendent consent agenda.
I'm Victoria here. I move to accept the superintendent's consent agenda.
Ms. Rob, I'll second it.
Second.
Jenny will second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
And Rachel?
Aye.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so next up on our agenda is the superintendent report. And so for this, I'm gonna call on Mike Merlino to give us his updates.
Thank you, Julie. It's just going to be kind of quick. I think we've, as a board, been meeting pretty much weekly, and you're pretty well aware of what we spent the majority of our time on, and that has been kind of the decisions around the fall reopening, and have led us to tonight's meeting where we'll actually present the reopening plan and share some of the information around that conversation. So honestly, we've spent a ton of time on that. The other thing that we've spent a lot of time on, or I spent a lot of time on, is working on the budget and getting that done. So tonight you'll have the first reading on our budget presentation for our budget for 2021. And I'll say it then, I'll say it now. I feel like this is probably the most uncertain moment in time from my perspective of building budgets for school districts. We just have so many questions still that remain unanswered, whether that's from the legislature, whether that's from what kind of enrollment we look at, just even at the federal level, what's happening at the federal level. So it's just it's been quite a summer. I don't think many people took a lot of time off. I think when people did get an opportunity to get away, that was great. I personally want to thank all of the instructional folks, the work that's gone into building the plan that's going to be presented tonight. I want to thank all of our cabinet members, our managers, our principals on the work around the budget. I want to personally thank Tammy Gasaway, who's worked on the budget in our school district for a number of years. She retired at the end of June. Tammy did a wonderful job for the district and was not only a great coworker, but a good friend as well. And I also want to welcome Jennifer Jacobson into the role of helping work with this budget as we move forward. So really that's what the bulk of our time's been around, those two areas, Zooming with whoever we needed to Zoom with, other superintendents, our health folks with Clark County, Superintendent Reichdahl, following Governor Inslee. It's been an interesting summer. The other thing that is significant that's ongoing is the work around our bond that was approved in 2018. It's August 11th, I believe. It's somewhere around the 20th or thereabouts that we take occupancy of the 3 new elementary schools, Emerald, Sifton, and Image. We talked last week at the board retreat about getting time set up to tour those buildings for the board. Of course, we have to do that in small groups so that we don't, it's not an official board meeting, but we'll schedule those for, I think it's the week of the, what day is today? It'd be the week of the 24th, I think, of August. We'll work on getting that set up for each of you that want to see that. And we've started, and you see when you drive by Y East, the ground cleared next to the school, Mountain View, the ground cleared. We've started accepting bids on different packages at Mountain View. That's going well as we start that as well. We're not completed, it's not complete in terms of the bids. So until we get it complete, don't really want to get too deeply into that. But the work that Sue Steinbrenner and RNC project management group, all of the folks in the facilities department has been tremendous. So I just want to say thank you to all of our staff for all the hard work. I know that people were able to take little breaks here and there, but it wasn't like, it wasn't the type of summer that we typically have. So I think I'll leave it at that. The 2 main things we'll be presenting on tonight, and so you'll have an opportunity to hear those plans and take some citizen comments and answer any questions that you have.
Great, thanks, Mike. I know I'm excited to take a look at some of those elementary schools, and it'll probably be even more exciting at some point when we get some kids in them. So,
And we will have kids in them.
Yes, but it'll be fun to see the new design and the new schools and build some excitement around those.
Yeah, I guess I would also say one thing I was able to do for the first time in my life, and that was to participate in a live forum on Coin TV last week, and I was particularly fortunate to get to answer a question on why schools weren't open as quickly as liquor stores and pot shops. So again, things that you don't ever really expect to deal with in your life, but I was able to do that last week. So that was, it's off my bucket list now.
You did a good job, and you represented all of Southwest Washington, because it was you and then 3 superintendents from the largest districts in Oregon. So we appreciate you representing not only Evergreen, but Clark County and all of everybody who gets Portland news, right? From our side of the river.
Yeah, it was a good experience, and you got to do these things to. The next time I'll be more comfortable, but it was a good opportunity, and I do appreciate that they asked, and I appreciate that it went relatively well. So that's all I have.
All right, any questions for Mike right now, or do we want to go ahead and get into the meat of our presentations that we've got this evening. All right, well, it looks like then we'll go right into fall reopening plan. I'm going to turn this back over to Mike, who's going to give us a brief summary, and then I think he's going to introduce who's going to present to us.
Yeah, I'm just going to really quickly just mention just exactly that. And again, as I said a minute ago, thanking Brian, thanking Julie Tumulty, Aaron Lusich, Clarissa, Jay Buno, Bill and Scott, and many we've had principals. I think one of the things that we a year ago when you added me to the role of superintendent, I talked about the fact that we have a lot of great people that work in our school district, and we do, and that we have experts throughout the system. What we've done is kind of relied on the experts that we've had that have worked in the district quite some time, who also then relied on our principals as experts. We listened to teachers. I think we did at least a couple surveys with our staff internally to provide input on what worked and what didn't work. And then at the same time, reach out to parents, allowing them an opportunity to share what from their perspective had worked in the spring and what didn't work in the spring. Understanding that the circumstances of the spring were different than what they are today. For one thing, we had, one day we're in school, the next day we're closed. So there was a short turnaround time on creating a plan. There was different conditions with respect to grading. We were told from the beginning that grades couldn't go backwards. All you could have were incompletes or letter grades. So it's just a different set of circumstances. And what I said last week was that it's really our job, in my view, to, from the beginning, hit the ground running. And that's really been what we've been trying to communicate with all our folks in district, is that we want to be in a position where kids have their devices, where kids are able to access as quickly as possible the materials. We want to make sure that the plan that we're presenting isn't just posted on our website, but that we actually, once we're at the appropriate moment in time, we were able to reach out to parents and let them know what they can expect when they come back. I think all along the hope had been with us that we would be in more on-site, in-school educational program, but very clearly over the summer, with respect to the increase in cases and just kind of what's happened around the country, we made the decision, I think a few weeks ago, to look at the remote learning model. Just the fact that we're remote learning doesn't mean we don't have the ability to have students in school. We're looking at students being in school on site in groups of 5 or smaller in certain situations, and we're continuing to work on those situations, things that we would consider certainly students with special needs, students that are maybe making their first entry into the system, kindergarten age students, 6th grade, where they're first in a building, or 9th grade. But none of those details are really finalized yet, but just understanding that our goal is to have students in small groups in school as quickly as we possibly can, and also with following the kind of the guidelines that the health department has put out and what the governor's office is putting out. So with all that being said, I think the most important thing is remembering that we're all here to educate our students, that we all have great jobs and opportunities to support our students, but we wouldn't exist in the roles we have if it wasn't for the fact that we are here to educate and take care of our students. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is make that connection as soon as we possibly can with our families, with our students, work with the parents as partners, and just honestly keep getting better as the year goes on, or until we end up having students back in greater numbers in our schools. So with that being said, I believe I'm going to turn this over now to Julie Tumulty, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, to talk about the plan and the template from the state, and and then we'll open it up for questions. And I think we've also got others that will participate in the conversation as well.
All right, thanks, Mike. And I will go ahead and share my screen now so that we can get to the reopening template. And all right, can everyone see the screen? Yes, great. Okay, so we're just going to go through the state's questions and make sure that we are all understanding each part of this. What Mike said before was that this is a cumulative effort of not only all of the entire departments in the school district, but community information, parent information, staff information. So doing the best that we can with a reopening plan for remote 2.0, while also knowing that at some point we will flip to hybrid. So there's models that also pertain to that. So first, part one just goes over the mandatory health requirements. So do we have a primary local health officer? Yes, Dr. Alan Melnick, and then our district kind of liaison has been Jay Buno. Our district primary point of contact is Janae Gomes and Brian Grimstead. And then number three, reviewing the ability for staff to identify them as high risk, and Human Resources has completed this requirement and is following the guidelines and processes that we've had in place for employees needing or requesting accommodations. So that stayed the same process. When we get to slide 4, so talking about drop-off and pickup plans, as Mike mentioned, right now we don't have full-scale students coming back, but we do have possibilities, and we do have a drop-up and pickup plan for when that happens. So we will look at the plan. What we came up with was in June, we had all of the building's best thinking around what plans look like, and then put together a district standard of what drop-offs and pickups look like, of providing social distancing, having designated entrances for parent drop-off, buses, walkers, and signage, clear markings at each entrance, each school with our physical distancing monitor. Health screening would be conducted each day. We'll get into that, but through the attestation process. Hand sanitizing stations, signage, and then information about non-essential visitors being admitted to school. So right now, because school's opening remotely, this drop-up and pickup plan is being built for everyone to set it up. But when we have a hybrid model, certainly scale up by building, everyone will go through the pieces of this. The next part is a daily health screening, which we did decide we're going to rely on attestations. I'll pop you over to that. So the attestations would be that the parents or guardians every school day would assess that their child does not have any of the following symptoms. It will be an electronic plan, and then we'll have them included in the student system. And then for those that do not have an electronic version, we'll have a building version for them to fill out. And then we'll log those so we can keep track. We also have a plan for staff screening, which is what we're currently doing in ASC, that we attest every day that we do not have any of those symptoms. All admin and certificated staff are completing the training through District Safe Schools platform. And all staff and students who've been at the facility for more than 15 minutes and observed to demonstrate any of the symptoms, this goes through what we would do, the screening process, if we see symptoms, and then to the quarantine isolation space. Okay. Moving on. The next question about altering our classroom spaces And again, since we are starting in remote, these are plans for what classrooms could look at. So Sue Steinbrenner and her group did a great job of going out to buildings, working with building admin, and looking at what building classrooms could look like. And so, oh shoot. So you can see different models on this screen once it's up of what possibilities are. We have different shaped desks in a lot of rooms. So are we having the individual desks? Do we have the rectangular desks, or do we have trapezoid tables? So there's different models that we can use and that teachers would be provided, and we would work with what each classroom would look like. Classrooms currently have not been altered since we're not bringing students back to that capacity from day one. Any questions so far? Okay. The next part is about meals. So we are working to provide meals in the remote space as well. So Jen Misfelt has done a great job on that, and has found some ways for us to provide meals not only daily, but for students to be able to pick up for multiple days. So there will be meal pickups from every building. Some of our buildings will use a shared campus. So the ones that have a shared campus like Cascade and Evergreen would have a shared meal pickup, but they can pick up multiple meals, both breakfast and lunch, daily, or for multiple days so that they don't have to show up daily, which is great for a lot of our kids. And then when we are back in school, we would have and ensure physical distancing of meal times, whether that's delivery to the classroom or in the cafeterias, the 6 foot. We have clear expectations around hand washing protocols and how to wash the hands, why hand washing is important, when to wash the hands, how to use hand sanitizer, and providing the proper facilities to do that. So in elementary, we're going to post hand washing signage, provide instruction for that, also in secondary. And then we have to implement some procedures once they're back in the classroom about how to reinforce hand washing and sanitation. All right, we have established clear expectations with students, staff, and families that all people in our facilities will be wearing face coverings. So at every entrance, there's signage requiring the face coverings. We have also ordered a large amount of face coverings for each building. Sue Steinbrenner again has a mechanism for when buildings need more supplies, that she will be able to get them more supplies when school's in session. But until that time, we have 6,000 reusable cloth adult masks, which would be able to provide 2 per staff member, 17,500 disposable adult masks, 5,000 reusable cloth child-sized masks, and which were made by volunteers, which is fantastic. And then 12,500 disposable child-sized masks. And we'll see what the need is once we get kids back in school.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So the reusable, not the reusable, the ones, the disposable ones, are those kind of be on site? Like if a kid comes to school, forgets their mask, really that's the only situation. We're not gonna be handing them out unless it's somebody forgets or they come on site and don't have one.
Correct. So every school and building will have a stash for them, and it's only when they don't bring their own.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, our busing plans to maximize physical distancing. When we're talking about hybrid, one of the main parts of our busing plans is to cut the schools in half. So we're talking about running 2 buses along every bus route. So we would do, and this is again, because we're not in hybrid, the details of which bus routes and when, but looking at a group A and a group B. And group A, in order to maximize physical distancing and keeping families together on the bus, that 2 buses would run together. And then when one was full, the next one would take the next group of kids. But then we'd at least double the amount of busing on each bus route. Number 11, a cleaning regimen. Again, Sue Steinbrenner has worked with ABM to have a thorough cleaning regimen for every school building. Right now, our buildings, you see the custodial staff coming through every knob, every touch point. They're cleaning multiple times a day. So those pieces have picked up. And then we're also working with, one of the things with the union is thinking about how do we clean between classes and what does that look like? So providing supplies and helping staff do some cleaning in between classes when that becomes in effect. And then number 12, we have a health and safety manual that goes through what are we going to do when we have a supported suspected case. And that labor and industries manual is coming out from HR. All right. So our school calendar right now is the same calendar that you looked at in the spring. There are built-in snow days that if needed could be a day. So one of the questions in here is, do we have flexible days if we need to make an immediate transition to continuous learning 2.0? We're in remote 2.0. When we go hybrid, if there was a time where we needed to go back, we do have those additional snow days in March and May that we could use if there was needed a time between now, once we go back to hybrid, if we needed to go to remote. But one of the benefits, I guess, in starting remote is that we have a system going. We can stay in this until we know we can pivot to the other one, and then hopefully there's no pivoting back. So no changes were made to the calendar. All right, so this is one of the areas where I wish we can show you a little bit more detail, but this is talking about what does a day, a schedule look like for our students. We do have a full 6-hour day planned. So when we're talking about elementary kids, one of the main questions I hear a lot is, what does their day look like? And curriculum instruction has been working really diligently with all different groups and principals and finding out, when we hear from parents and from students, what do they want in a day? What do we need? What's in the best practice of a day? So what we're looking at is multiple synchronous sessions in one day. So when we're talking about synchronous, we're talking about a time where teachers and students are all together in session together. So looking at having a small chunk of time synchronous and then having some asynchronous time where the student's doing something else. So it's chunked out throughout the day, one for the teacher and for the students, but it does include basically a full day from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock or whatever the school day would look like, but 6 hours of instruction with a lunch break. And the instruction at times will be all group. And one thing that we're really thinking about is what should happen full group, what should happen small group, what can happen and live digitally that we record ahead of time, and what really needs to be live. So curriculum instruction is also thinking about what is the social emotional impact of when we're with people. How do we build that specifically into the plan? And that's been a targeted piece of work for that group to think about how do we build community? What are we doing to get to know our students? So in a school day, those pieces are there. For teachers, there's time in the school day to give extra supports. There's time for feedback. There's time for team time. We're looking at how we can meet the needs of our students, how we can meet the needs of the teachers, and give structure. So we're building in those pieces to a school day. And again, I don't have the picture to show you today as we're still working on it with the union. And then high school would be, the idea is, again, a 6-hour day. They attend all their classes synchronously multiple times a week. And then they also have asynchronous sessions. So curriculum instruction is giving models of what does it look like when we do synchronous, what should we be doing whole group, small group, individual. What are the tech tools we need? So they're thinking really thoughtfully, and we're going to push out to teachers, what are those pieces and what do we do in the days and times when we have with kids? Questions on this slide? All right. Going good. We have a plan to take daily attendance. Yes, we're going to take attendance. I think one thing we really want to let parents and the community know, and 2.0 is different. There are requirements that students show up. There are requirements that students do things this year. Grading is going to come up in a couple slides from now, but grades matter. Grades have to be a part of this. And so having students engage and show up to school. And what does that mean is a piece we're talking about in this as a group, which this opening plan doesn't ask about, but we're really talking about attendance and then engagement. And how are we tracking engagement, as that is a big piece in remote that we need a chance to get a hold of and think about in terms of, are they attending their synchronous sessions? Are they doing their work? Are they communicating? Are they, what level are they doing in all of these things? So we have a team working around that, and also thinking about, so not just attendance, just are you showing up, but then to what level are you showing up and how are you doing work? So that hits to the ongoing plan for communication, because that engagement team will be communicating home. When we catch a kid, right away, it's a phone call home, it's an email, it's how are we communicating and then getting them. And then there's a process for, this refers back to what Mike was saying about who comes into the building. The students with the highest need we're gonna find a plan to come back into the building. How can we catch them back and get them re-engaged?
So Julie, can you explain how exactly attendance is going to be taken, or have we figured that out yet?
So we're looking at that when students log in to their computer in ClassLink or Google Classroom, we're going to run a report that students have shown up to school. Okay. So daily, have they shown up onto their classes? And that's where we're going to figure out the difference. Okay, they showed up, they're here, they came to school today, like they entered the school building is kind of how we're thinking about that. And then the engagement team is working on, now what are they doing when they're here?
Okay, have you guys had conversations around, like, I'm thinking elementary students whose parents or who are at daycare or camp or who can't attend the virtual sessions with their, who won't be doing the 9 to 3 that you're talking about. How will are they taking that into consideration when they think about engagement or attendance?
So attendance will be in most likely a 24-hour period. So did they attend in that 24-hour period? And then our synchronous sessions, how are we recording them so that people can engage when they have time? Because we know that this is certainly putting a stress on a lot of family members and they can't engage during the school hours. And so making the work accessible to them outside the school hours and then not dinging them for not showing up, but understanding it. So that would be something that the engagement team would dig into with that family. And if students aren't showing up to the Zooms and they're talking to them and saying, hey, I didn't notice you're not showing up to the live Zoom, that gives us information to just help that family and say, okay, maybe that's not a possibility. So are they still getting what they need by watching the recorded sessions?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You're muted.
I'm muted. Sorry about that. I would say really quickly after I unmute. So we take attendance throughout the school year, but funding is not based upon attendance. It's based upon enrollment. I think, though, that the legislature is going to have a watchful eye on this question for OSPI to make sure that there are ways of ensuring that kids are participating. I don't think we'll go to some average daily attendance. I don't think that I think at some point there's going to be more scrutiny of this from the legislature as they face an almost $9 billion shortfall. And if there's kids enrolled in schools that aren't engaged in any fashion, that's going to be a problem, I would imagine. And I think it's why the work that's gone in with Julie and Aaron and Brian and everybody, the teams talking about student engagement and having teams of staff making sure that we're reaching out and making those connections with kids, keep them engaged, it's important. So I just wanted to say that real quick.
Thanks, Mike. All right, number 16, we have identified learning standards across grade levels and or content areas to ensure instructional time and professional learning are effectively tied to our reopening plan. So this is some of the work that CNI has been working on all summer, is identifying standards, priority standards, and then bringing the work to what does instruction look like. So I'm gonna take you to some guidance, and this is what we are rolling out to teachers and staff in terms of what is the instructional guidance and operational guidance that they're going to be getting in the fall. So as it loads, we're talking about like, what does our remote 2.0 plan look like? And first of all, to reference the question, it talks about a modified scope and sequence. So understanding that in a remote environment, different processes and procedures take longer, and that means we have to change some of what we're being able to teach. So our modified scope and sequences, K8, have been created from the curriculum instruction team. That means that they have prioritized the standards. They've taken some out and really said, this is the bulk of what we need to do this semester. So working from a semester approach right now, knowing that we are not sure what the spring is going to look like. And then from there, figuring out, well, what do we need operationally to get remote 2.0 working? So this is a guidance that will outline the system, practices, and expectations for teachers and specialists that are key in the weekly and daily planning of remote learning to ensure student success. And what we heard over and over, collaboration and communication. So collaborating on the team level, collaborating at the school level, and making sure that we are communicating plans appropriately within schools and then also out to the community, that parents understand what it is kids and are expected to do within the week. We're talking about supply distribution, how to get children supplies to and from school, book distribution, supply distribution, technology distribution. Grading, again, a standard grading will come up again. Student engagement team, that's what I talked about previously. Measuring and monitoring what we're doing and how we are providing those supports. And then we have a lot of professional development supports that have been put in to support teachers. There's optional supports throughout the month of August. And then as well as our regular professional development calendar, early release calendar throughout the school year. The instructional guidance would provide a structure of instructional practices and routines and how they live remotely, because remote teaching is different from teaching in a classroom, but some of the same, our workshop practices are the same. How are we starting in a community circle with the kids? How do we do that introduction and really meet the needs of the kids in the community first? In these, we're looking at the whole group, small group, and individual. And so having teachers have a context to think about that. How are we gaining input from kids? What are we learning from the kids during our lessons? And then how do we plan for that? Thinking about what are the tools we need, and then expectations for assessment and feedback. So the instructional guidance has been a huge bulk of work that curriculum instruction has done to help teachers think through teaching in a remote space, and then professional development around that. So those professional development tools, again, will be coming throughout the month of August. So then the blue bars at the very bottom, we will have a schedule hopefully soon out for teachers, students, and families. A day in the life is what we're hoping to provide you soon. what's the day of the life of a teacher, day in the life of a student, day in the life of a parent, helping, maybe not parent, but students and families, so that they can really understand what it is that their child's day looks like. We're going to have internally some design tools so that teams can be using teamwork to collaborate and design the work. We want to really lean into teams as it provides a consistent and clear instructional practice across grade levels, across schools, that parents can really then rely on. And then weekly, week at a glance, parent-facing pages to communicate to parents the expectations. The goal of those is to have them in common forms so that, one, we would like them translated. We need to get this information out to multiple languages, and then have the common form that teachers can use. But at least if we had a translated form, parents that need the translated form would have the outline of what the form is, and then their students can help them fill in the gaps, as weekly teacher pages can't always be translated. So those will live on a building landing page, internal, and then we'll have the family-facing websites just like last year to continue. Now, all of this document was not made in a vacuum. It was made with a ton of feedback from different stakeholders. And just to show you the accumulation of feedback that went into this document, and it's probably written really small. It's going to be hard to see depending on the size of what you're looking at. But each piece of this was layered in with the feedback we got from multiple surveys. We had the May survey, we had the 2 June surveys, we had the early August survey that was to community members, staff members, parents. And all of that feedback went into this instructional guidance, into what we're doing. So a big piece of that was, I'm so thankful for how many people are answering surveys right now. We are getting a ton of information from them. And then there's been a lot of work of prioritizing what are the needs of parents, what are the needs of our staff members, and what do kids need to make all of this successful. So when you have time, just digging into that feedback is, I think, really valuable to see where and when, why these pieces live where they do. Okay, I'm gonna move on. I mentioned a few times the grading policies. In the spring, we had the do no harm grades. That is not how we're continuing. In elementary school, we're continuing with our performance-based, standards-based scale. In middle school and high school, we do have the traditional A through F scale. With that, though, knowing that we have students that have all different situations at home and different pieces happening, that we have to think about grading a little bit differently. So we have some proposed grading practices that we're still working on, making sure these details are okay with our teachers. So the proposed grading practices would be that grades are based on student work and individual proficiency and not timing of work submission. That we're not grading behavior in this remote space. That we would allow students to retake and resubmit to show growth towards standards. Avoiding the 0 for missing work and punishment. And that we are effectively monitoring students' progress through weekly updated grades and feedback. And that last one was a big one, I think, for our community. Is in the spring, there was a lack of information due to systems and different pieces that we weren't able to give timely progress to parents. And so that is when we really are focusing on how can we give weekly updated feedback to parents and communicate progress. Okay. Sorry, I did pop in this scale just because the link wasn't working. So just a reminder of what the elementary standards scale was. The link wasn't happened to be working at the time. Okay. Our incomplete. So our district has a specific plan to support students who received incompletes. In the spring, every high school had teachers, counselors, and admin come up with plans for the students that had an incomplete. So at that time, they identified what standards did the students not meet to earn a grade in the class and what would be the path to that. So every person filled out a Google sheet that includes that information. If the gap was so big, it might include credit recovery. But if the gap was a doable set of standards, it's meeting that standard. So that team, again, the counselors, admin, and teachers will reconvene in the very beginning of the year to meet and work with that student on what's the plan now to meet the standard. So we have some students that will be enrolled in credit recovery due to the vastness of standards they need to meet, but a large group of students will also be meeting the standard and working through that plan. Okay, one of the areas that was asked about was summer learning and experiences and service opportunities. So this summer, we were able to serve in 3 different programs about 3.4% of our students, or 846. The 3 programs that we're running this summer were extended school year for students with IEPs, where the services were customized to meet each student's needs. Extended school year is not summer school, but extension of their need based on their IEP. Academic camp, which is actually running right now. It's day 2 of academic camp. This is 2-hour sessions for grades 1 through 6 that includes literacy and math and some social emotional, as what we know kids are excited to get back in school for those connections with their teachers. And I just want to say, give a little update on academic camp. We are getting some great feedback on how academic camp went. A kid today said he didn't want to leave school. He was so happy to be back. We have some great pictures of students with their masks on, no one having trouble with masks, no one having trouble with the rules. Sometimes social distancing, we have to remind, okay, 6 feet apart. You know, like some of those practices that as they become routine, they're going to be fine. Drop off and pick up, making sure that we have all the social distancing in place, all of the processes to get in. But from what I've heard, the staff and students are really happy to be back and see each other, even in small groups, that we're able to serve about 600 kids in camp during these 2 weeks. And it's a really good chance for us to experiment with bringing small groups of students in. And from what I've heard, day 2, again, it's gone really well, and those students and staff have been pleased with the process, and that the social distancing safety regulations have been in place. And then also in summer, we offer summer school. Students who qualify for free and reduced lunch do get a discount. So thinking about how are we catching kids up in the summer, those are the 3 ways we're catching students. We always go, especially with academic camp, it's going off the need of rank ordering kids according to assessments and who has the biggest need, and then bringing in those students. We are asked to have a universal screener this year for each student when they return to school to better understand their strengths, learning needs, and social emotional needs. So we've been using Panorama in the past, which will meet this. We're also extending iReady for up through 12th grade. So we need some measurement and ability to measure students, also academic and their social emotional. So Panorama and iReady are both going to be running in September and October. Family and community engagement and our strategies to reach non-English speaking families. So I think one of the things that we've been really targeting is how are we communicating with our different Russian, Spanish populations, as those are the bulk of our non-English speaking families. All the surveys that have gone out from the spring on have all been translated. So we're really trying to get multiple perspectives on those, as well as our liaisons have called families to reach out and say, have you filled out the survey? Did you see Superintendent Merlino's Zoom? Did you see the transcript after that we were able to translate? So in those pieces, really targeting the families and making sure that we're just not sending something out, but we're sending it out and being respectful of the native language. All of the informational materials, including just last week, we sent a postcard out to families to let them know about Remote 2.0 to any family that didn't have an email address listed in files, and that was in multiple languages. So we really want to make sure, and we're targeting, that we're getting all information out in different modalities. Okay, we're almost done. We're doing great. Number 22, our connectivity, technology, hardware. Last spring, we made the decision to let students keep their Chromebooks, which is going to be a huge bonus for us come September 1st. So we think by September 1st, we'll have 91 to 100, hopefully 100% of students ready to go on day one. Currently, buildings are working on sending out surveys, phone blasts that include, do you have your Chromebook? Do you have a charger? Do you have a Wi-Fi hotspot? Do you have Wi-Fi? If not, do you need a Wi-Fi hotspot? Do you know your login? So we're doing a big blast in the next couple weeks to make sure that students have what they need day one, and we have all of the things to give them. So we have enough devices for everyone. We think enough Wi-Fi hotspots for everyone, and that we'll get them what they need before school starts on day one. So that includes technology, but then also making sure they can log on and they're ready to learn. Okay, professional learning, I mentioned this a little bit, but throughout the spring, the curriculum instruction department, as well as ELL, federal programs, they offered a variety of professional development throughout the spring. This also then moved into spring, summer, and now August, where there's a professional development calendar that just is coming out for teachers. They have synchronous sessions that they can log into, live synchronous sessions, as well as asynchronous on their own time sessions. Things to help them with tech tools like Pear Deck, Google Classroom, WeVideo. We have a variety of tech tools that teachers are going to need access to and know how to use. A lot of them dabbled in them in the spring, and now we're getting them more. Also, our professional development days on August 26th, 27th, and 28th are going to focus on Remote 2.0. So we know right now that this is the biggest need. We have wonderful classroom teachers, and they are going to need some time, but they're going to be wonderful Remote 2.0 teachers, and they are dedicated to the needs of our kids, and we're going to provide them time to be able to do that with then the outline and the instructional guides that I mentioned on a previous slide. And we did decide on a learning management system, which is Google Classroom. And I'm done.
I don't know if
Thanks,
any,
Julie. That was a lot of information.
Julie.
Mike, did you want to?
I just want to say good job and say, I just want to say thank you. I'll zip my mouth now.
we have a few questions from the audience that have been typed in.
Yeah, so at this point, we will take some questions or comments from people out there that want to raise their hands. The moderator will unmute you at this point. Just be sure to state your name and your address, and then just take a couple of minutes and make sure that your comments are just related right now to the school reopening plan. Do we have anybody that's raised their hand? I do see that we have the 3 in the question and answer, or there's 4, 5. I don't know how we want to, if we want to answer some of those questions at this point.
It looks like there's a couple hands up too. I don't know how the hands up work.
I don't see the hands, but maybe,
I can see two hands. One is Alicia is on the top of the list.
so do we want to go with the hands first? The people have raised their hands, and unmute them so they can ask their question. Sure.
We're having a little trouble on our end because we're not seeing the hands up for some reason.
Okay. Do
I
we want to go
opened-
to the Q&A then and start with that? Sure. So this question was put in from Jessica Cummings. She asked, will teachers have para support to help meet students' needs? Not sure who wants to take that one, or
I can respond in the sense of students with special education needs, and that yes, teachers will have paraeducator support to help implement the remote learning plan.
you know what's going on. Perfect, thank you. Another question, I'm not sure who submitted it because it comes in anonymous. Will teachers in elementary be team teaching?
I could take this one. As Julie mentioned, we're building structures for teams to be working together very consistently. That's built into the schedule of the week, and a common framework for that team teaching to occur, so that we're leveraging the shared brilliance of a team and the shared capacity of a team, and dividing the work accordingly.
Okay. Another one that comes in anonymous, if my student needs Chromebook support during the year, will there be tech support? And I would probably answer that. We will definitely get them some tech support, but maybe somebody who, maybe Brian?
Yes, yes, Julie. Yeah, we have EPS Tech. It's an email, EPS Tech at Evergreen, evergreenps.org, and anybody can send in an email, and it will go to our help desk, and then it'll be distributed out to the schools. So if it's a tech issue that IT will take care of, it'll be taken care of there first. And if it's more of a school-based one, let's say there's some common issues like you can't log in, things like that. There might be a school-based one, say with a program like Seesaw, where a student has a problem, then when that would filter down to the school. And the school page, every school has a tech team that includes an administrator, the instructional coach, typically the teacher librarian, and then some other folks that are in the building that have capacity around that or experts. So we feel pretty good about that. We did that in the spring and it worked really well. And so then we've already had that conversation with all the schools. That will be going out to parents as well. The other piece is on every student's Chromebook, there will be an email where they can just click right there on their home screen, and that will also help them. So we'll have some set up right on the home screen if they have a problem.
Great, thanks, Brian. I'm going to have you answer this question as well as it pertains to devices. It comes from Rebecca Cunningham. It's, will preschool students have devices?
Well, I think it might be an answer of Jay and myself. Last year, it was more of iPads. We're still looking at that. It could be iPads. Again, it depends. In some of the preschool, it depends on what the student needs are. So we match the tech with the student needs. And I'm not sure if Jay wants to add to that.
The only thing in addition to that, is that in preschool, we will be providing multiple different ways of engagement. And so what I mean by that is we won't just have an electronic method, but we'll have materials provided in a similar manner to what we started, but we're also trying to gain access for Chromebooks and other options too. But the students will have what they need to engage. So.
All right, next question is what happens to classified personnel? I'm not sure who wants to take that one. That might be kind of one of the ones that we might not have completely answered yet.
Brian, do you want to take that one? No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Love to, Mike.
I think that when we talk about the budget, some of the things that we'll talk about within the budget are kind of the differences between last spring and this fall. And one of the things I will just say, obviously, before we even get to the budget is when we closed last fall, everyone was held harmless in terms of funding. and there was a real clear directive from the state that all staff would be maintained, the funds would continue. We're not receiving that message from the state now. We have lobbied both the OSPI, the governor's office, senators, anybody that would listen, that there should be hold harmless for enrollment as there was in the spring, and in particular transportation funding, which is generated based upon ridership counts throughout the year, should be something that should be held harmless. What we're hearing at this point in time is that neither of those things are going to be the case. So when I said earlier that there are just the uncertainty around this year is an uncertainty that has not existed in all the time I've been doing this work. We do have a lot of uncertainty right now. So what we're looking at is what, I think the question came up, will there be paras? Yes, there will be paras supporting special needs. We still will use folks as we have used them, but we're still working through situations where you don't have a school on site. How does that work? And we're working with our local PSC group. We're meeting again with them Thursday. I think we'll have more to add on that as this week and probably even early next week, if not by the end of this week. So I think that our funding will be impacted this year, and there likely will have to be some adjustments. We haven't worked those all out yet.
All right, so the next one is about, it comes from Celeste. It says, how do you plan to keep kids, especially teens, with the social and emotional aspects of learning? I think we touched briefly on that in the presentation. I don't know if we have anything specific to say about that or some of the...
Yeah, I would say all the models that we're working on in the professional development with teachers is to build in social emotional to every day of their classroom, especially synchronous. When we think about what are we doing when we catch the kids live, how are we building in the social emotional practices into the classroom? So the models that teachers are going to be given and looking at to build off of include those social emotional practices.
Perfect, thank you. The next comment says, I appreciate all the work that has gone into this plan. Will classroom assistants that work directly with teachers and students be getting any of this training along with the teachers to be able to adequately assist? Would that be a Jay question maybe, or?
I can answer it from Jay's perspective, which I think is a uniform one in that, yeah, we'll be supporting the classified staff that we have in providing instruction to support the students in a similar manner, maybe not at the same time, but at a similar manner to our teachers, so.
All right, next one comes from Christina Kennington. Do you have plans for school trips and tours for the spring? I don't know, maybe I'll take this one. Spring's a ways off. I'm not really sure, what things will look like by then. I think that would be up in the air at this point. Mike, do you want to maybe speak to that as well?
Well, I'm assuming when they're saying spring tours and
Maybe.
School, yeah, I mean, I think that would be definitely dependent upon where we're at with respect to reopening. Are we in hybrid? Where are we at with a chance at a vaccine? Is there different ways of, it says something happened different. I would say if you follow what's happened, particularly with, I would kind of look at trips and tours similar to athletics and some of the things that are going on, which basically the state has effectively moved all of the athletic extracurricular activities to the spring or the winter at the earliest. So my sense would be there's a chance for those things to happen. We're going to have to see how things develop over the next several months. I think we're hopeful that all these things can happen and we want them. I think if we can do it and we can do it safely for kids and safely for our staff, we're gonna make things happen. But it's hard to commit to something at this point in time when we literally every day wake up to some new news. It's a very challenging time.
Will the virtual high school day mimic periods with certain meeting times for each class? I think that was answered in the presentation, that there would be a full schedule, 6 periods, and that they would have a chance to log on. Is that correct, Julie?
Yeah, there will be, I mean, similar to a bell schedule of what time does first period start, what time does second period start, and then there's just gonna be a difference of whether it's synchronous or asynchronous.
All right. Will a student need to be seen on video for attendance? I know some parents are concerned about their children who don't want to be on video. So I think that was answered too by just logging into the system. Is that correct? Okay. Will there be childcare provided for teachers who have school-aged children?
So I'll answer that. I know that we have reached out to various partners and talked about making space available in our elementary schools in the gyms with the appropriate social distancing numbers of students with staff. So it not only for childcare, but also I think we've had conversations with Boys and Girls Club, the Y, Parks and Rec for running camps and opportunities. And I think that it would be, I think it would be my hope that we would make sure that some of those slots were available for our own staff if need be, absolutely. So we're still working through that. I know that the partner that we've worked with primarily for childcare has been the ESD, the Southwest Washington Child Care Consortium. I'm honestly not even sure if that's what they're called, but everybody knows that we have before and after school in many of our elementaries, extending that to a day-long program where you maybe take an elementary gym and have some kids on either side of the gym with the appropriate social distancing so that the numbers wouldn't be huge, but there would be availability, and we would work with them from the perspective of trying to have slots available for our own staff if that was something we determined needed to happen, yes.
All right, the next one is about teachers having flexibility about working from home.
I'm not going to answer this question necessarily, but when I see you answer the question, Julie, I'm looking for you to nod back. Oh, okay, that makes sense. But it's really not your question, so that's why you're not doing that. So what was the question again? Flexibility?
It was a question about will there be flexibility for teachers to work from home?
I guess what I would say is that we're working with EEA. We're working through an MOU on that, and I think we've got a meeting scheduled for Friday at noon is the next one. We've, I think, had 3 or 4 meetings already, and we continue to work on that.
All right, next question. When parents need to be present at work, do we really trust that a parent attestation form is the safest way to screen students to protect staff and other children? So I guess this is about saying that they're healthy, but then sending them to school when they're not feeling well.
I can talk about that, and then Jake can add in as well. That we think that's a good way to go. It's one of those options from the state. Obviously, we have to work through it with parents and families and students. Because you can see in the plan, one of the plans as well is if a student shows signs or if we don't have that attestation, we will have to meet the student and then figure that piece out when they get to school. So that's still a process in the hybrid environment. And so we feel like we have a little bit of time to keep fine tuning it, but obviously it's something we will have to work on with our families.
And then we'll probably just have to do obviously some training with staff to make sure that we're looking for symptoms and.
Yes. We have trainings in place for staff to be able to recognize that. And even in circumstances, just to affirm what Brian's saying, where a partner, a parent partner with us attests that the child was not ill when they left, we all know that symptoms develop later. So we will have processes for doing screenings when things are recognized in school also.
All right, great. The next question is how will it work with substitute teachers? Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that I think is also kind of part of the conversation around work site, but I mean, the anticipation would be at this point, if folks are at buildings, that there would be a need for substitute teachers occasionally, but I think that will also be, we'd have to have conversations around the time that the substitute teacher would actually be engaging with the student. You know, now a substitute teacher's there from whatever time in the morning till the end of the day. In a synchronous, asynchronous, where maybe the schedule isn't the same schedule, a substitute teacher could look different than what one looks like today. But I anticipate that we may have a need for substitute teachers, but we still, in working through the MOU with EEA, I think we'll have the final answer when that's complete.
Okay. Next question. I soon have a soon-to-be high school freshman. Will there be any sort of high school orientation that she can take part in? I think we kind of talked about that in the getting kids in small groups and getting them, if it's their first time in high school, first time in middle school, first time as a kindergartner, trying to get those kids in and part of the first groups when we can move to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and all of the high schools and all of the kind of the transition years, kindergarten, 6th, 9th, we're looking at what are the ways that we can get them oriented to the school, what are the ways we get them connected to a building. So plans are still in process for that, but parents can expect more information in the next couple of weeks.
Will professional development days be remote? Are we still working that one out?
You're talking about the 3 days in August that Julie was referring to.
That's what I'm assuming the question. It just says,
Yeah.
will the professional days be remote?
Oh, that's right. You didn't ask the question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Julie?
Oh.
Either one of you. No, you're fine, Aaron. Go for it.
I just was going to say that regardless of where teachers and teams are located, the PD will be offered in modularized form over in virtual space for safety purposes.
Okay. There's a question here about when will the school debut be out? It says that Ridgefield has their schedule published. I think we're still working out the details of that.
Well, we are working out the details. Like I said, we meet Friday. Hopefully we can at least come to a consensus on releasing the schedule as we kind of work through the rest of the issues. I think that some of the schedule conversation has occurred. So hopefully by the end of this week or early next week, we'd be able to have that information out.
A question about high school students, if they will be allowed to choose some aspects of their schedule to put most of their synchronous classes in blocks.
No. So the schedule from our preliminary work would be going synchronous, asynchronous to give students and teachers also breaks for that. So it would be staggered throughout the day.
Okay, thank you. Next question or comment says, I see a lot of focus about cleaning and wiping surfaces, but no mention was made about the poor ventilation in classroom buildings. What is the plan to protect students and staff from an aerosol spreading virus in rooms that have hardly any ventilation, no windows, or windows that don't open?
So Sue's not on the call, but this question has come up a number of times. Or she's not on the Zoom. She's watching. She's not a panelist. She shared a document with me that kind of looks at the CDC's guidelines, the guidance, the World Health Organization's guidance on it, and it talks about the spread. And it also then there was an association of HVAC. I don't know what the name of it was. But the primary recommendation from all of those groups is social distancing. It's that the spread is through droplets, and there wasn't specific talk about recirculating, at least in the document she shared, through an HVAC system. I know that our HVAC systems do take in outside air and recirculate air, but primarily the idea would be around the social distancing being what would be keeping folks, the masks and social distancing, the primary measure to deal with that issue. It's unfortunate that Sue's not on, and let's see here. Yeah, so what Sue's just texting me is as we're following this ASHRE's guidance, which is, I don't know what that stands for, but it's heating and cooling. We're doing a 2-hour flush before and increasing outside air. So we do those things. We make sure that there's social distancing within the buildings. And yeah, that's the guidance we're following.
It looks like she's coming on, Mike.
Oh, she is. She has the ability to do that?
Oh, there she
She
is.
just materializes. How you just materialize like that? I didn't know you. It's a nice haircut, Sue.
I made her a panelist.
Fluffy. So yeah, we are following ASHRAE's guidance, and they have a position paper on with the CDC and the World Health Organization to make sure they're all on the same page. But what we're doing is a 2-hour morning flush. So bringing in 100% outside air during the morning warm-up time. And then we are also increasing our outside air temperature, which we've met with our engineers and kind of looking at that may need to be adjusted if we get into wildfire season, and as well as we start getting into cooling season, because we can't bring in all the outside air if it's super cold. So some of the things we're looking at are adjusting our occupancy sensors so that instead of like with an occupancy sensor, if you have a room full of 30 people, then it's demand ventilation. We're going to turn those off. So if there's only one teacher in the room, we'll still have ventilation. So we've worked at great lengths with our different engineering firms because we have different systems in each building to try and make sure that we're following all of the ASHRAE guidance. We've also increased our filter rating to be able to get lower microns to be able to clean more of the stuff out of the air. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks,
That did, thank you. The next question is, what are the plans for sports and performing arts?
I can take that one. As far as sports, we're just following the WIA guidelines, and our district AD, Kale Pilens, we've been working with WIA and the league in terms of middle school and high school. So at this point, there are no sports in the fall. The day the WIA came out and said that boys golf has to get to phase 3 before that can happen. So we were hoping that boys golf could happen. That would have been the only sport. So we continue to make plans to try and have every sport season, and then just going to depend on the phase we're in and just the situation. Right now, currently we have students who are using our weight rooms and in small groups of 5, following all the guidelines, and at all the high schools and some of the middle schools, and that's worked well to date, and we've learned a lot from that, how to do that. So that's kind of where we are on the sports. As far as the fine arts, Corinne Ormson deserves a great deal of credit. She's been working with all the music teachers, and so we have a really good plan, I believe, that'll starting with getting students instruments. So like any year, we're going to get students instruments. That's part of that supplies plan, that if you're in band, choir, orchestra, and there's things that you need, we're going to get you those things. As well, they're committed as fine arts teachers to having performances. We don't know what that'll look like, but they're committed to making that happen for students. And then they have a plan around synchronous and asynchronous, what students can do if they're together in a group. For instance, playing Google Meets, they can have a concert or practice and do some of that, and asynchronous. And so there's been a lot of work on that. We're hoping, we know students who love music and love that experience need to have that, and so we're hoping to do the best we can in the distance environment. And the same with athletics.
All right, thanks, Brian. The next question is about overly aggressive web filters that were a huge problem for asynchronous resources in the spring at the high school level. Is this something that can be improved upon for teachers and students? Delays were impactful on what can be covered remotely.
And I would say one of the interesting things about this situation we're in is as I said a number of times, there's a through line from the student all the way to the superintendent. So this is one of those things where we have to collectively solve them and solve them fast. As we know, when students are either synchronous or asynchronous, they're trying to work at home. If there's a frustration, it can stop the whole learning. So again, I would say the EPS Tech at evergreenps.org is the way to get that, and we monitor that not 24/7, but at least during the school day. And then the other piece is we are a large community, so sometimes people feel like it's over aggressive, and other people feel the exact opposite. So it's finding out what is educationally needed, necessary, and sometimes we make decisions that not everybody likes. But getting the feedback is super important because we want to be as responsive as possible, as quickly as possible.
Great, thanks, Brian. The next question is about classified having training, and I think we've answered that. So if there's a duplicate question, we're just going to move on from it and then go to the next. The next one is high schoolers forecasted their classes back in January. When will they know their schedule will look like? Will some classes not be offered anymore? I'm assuming that they're talking about electives.
Yeah, we're planning on offering all the electives that they signed up for. Schedules, like every other year, we will put them out in late August. So there's always tweaks being made of balancing classes, that schedules will be available in late August.
Okay. When will teachers receive the new scope and sequence?
I think much like the schedule, we're working in concert with the conversations with EEA at this time. So, and need to be responsive to those conversations. So we have a lot of things in their best draft form at this time based on the multitude of feedback that we've collected and that have driven all of these components. And then following these conversations and negotiations, we will issue the final drafts as soon as we are permitted and agreed.
Perfect. Next one, and I'm probably going to look to Jay to answer this. Will special education classrooms be in classroom teaching in either small groups for a limited time during the day or full days? That might be kind of determined once we can determine which students we need to bring in small groups and when we can do safely. But Jay, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just emphasize and reiterate that student and staff health and safety is a primary focus to all of us. And I think we will continue to communicate that in the decisions we make. And we want nothing more than to bring our students who are not able to benefit from our remote learning program to provide direct in-person services in small groups. And we're going to be working with our teachers, we're going to be working with our community and just the recommendations and metrics that we have to do that as soon as we reasonably can for students who are unable to benefit and or we can't design access to the remote learning program.
All right. One question comes in about employee layoffs and when will people be informed of those decisions. It's mentioned it's still uncertain, but at a point we'll need to know. Is there a date that people can know what their plans will be for next year?
So I guess the way I would answer that is first to kind of just explain a little about what we already have done in terms of trying to get ahead of this issue. In the spring, every spring, we have a number of classified positions that folks change their position at the end of the school year. They decide to do other things over the summer and end up resigning their positions. We made a decision in June to do a hiring freeze. Basically, we had a number of open positions at that time that we decided it was best to hold off filling those positions in June or over the summer when the buildings wanted to post those and get folks hired, with the idea around the uncertainty about what was actually going to happen over the summer. By doing that, I know that a lot of our classified paras are within the special ed program. I know that we have contract language that outlines how many paras we should staff. We typically are over that number. But a lot of the work that we've been doing has been looking at those open positions that we didn't hire, and can we move people potentially around, and we need to work with the union on that, but just looking at that. So I feel happy. I don't feel happy about what we all face at all, but I'm at least, I feel better that we were ahead of that There were a number of positions that we'll need to fill, and we'll be able to do that by reassigning people. So when I think about layoffs, I think about two things. One, I think about if you have a school that's open that doesn't have students attending on a daily basis, what are the staff that we would typically, that we would be required in that type of situation? So I think there may be some positions that we would look at laying off before school would actually start. And that's the conversations I'm talking about in the next week or so. So I could see that there be some conversation around layoffs sometime next week, if not sooner than that. But the second piece is laying off staff isn't something to be taken lightly. In these cases, it's staff that have worked very hard in the district and done well by the district for potentially an extended period of time. And so we don't want to make decisions before we should on that. I don't think it's wise for us to do that. The point in time where we'll have a better idea for sure is September 1st is the first day of school. We start to see what the enrollment is. September 4th is the actual first enrollment count date. So that's that first Friday where we actually have a sense of what our counts look like. And you've heard, you haven't heard, but I in conversations that I've been part of, and we see folks sending in intent to homeschool, things like this, which is why it's important to us to make sure that we have a program that is a good program for a good option for parents. We want to talk to those parents that are considering remote homeschooling, and I understand everybody makes their decisions, but we want to make sure that people understand how good the program is that we have available for our folks, because if our enrollment does decline significantly, it isn't something that our district is built to. We don't have immense unlimited reserves, and I think our district is one that has done quite well over the years of not building up large reserves, because we don't tax our citizens to build reserves. We tax our citizens to provide a program, a great program for our kids. And I think we've done that. I think we do that. And I think we're wanting to continue to do that. So I say all that just to basically illustrate that when we see what our counts are in September, we likely will have to react to that in some fashion. I'm not giving you a specific answer to your question. We want to make sure that we're making good decisions. And when we know where the kids are in terms of what our enrollment looks like, it's going to be easier for us to do that. And I think a second reason why it's extremely important for us to have the best program we could possibly offer and a competitive program for anywhere is that not only are we working to have kids return to school, but we're also working to have kids stay in school. And I think that's also why it's very important for us to make sure that there's hope for our families, that we do have kids coming in small groups, and we work through some of these things. I think it's great that we have summer school going on right now. We might be one of the only schools in the area that has a summer school with the numbers of kids participating. I appreciate our staff for signing on to do that, our teachers. I appreciate our principals in those buildings where this is occurring. I appreciate our families being there. School is extremely important for our community, and it's important for our kids. We need to provide a great program for our kids. We all should be here with nothing else in mind but to do our best for our kids. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And it's, I think there's difficult decisions ahead of us, and I think that's extremely unfortunate. I also think it's unfortunate that the legislature can't step up and help us through a difficult situation. They've got their own challenges that they're faced. So that's kind of a long answer, and I don't know that I necessarily answered it exactly the way you wanted it, but that's my answer for today.
All right, thanks, Mike. I also wanted to remind everybody that later this week, we are going to have a webinar posted on our website with kind of a Q&A, and I believe that we'll probably have some sort of Q&A that will go up on our website with many of these questions and many more that people are asking. Is that correct, Mike? I don't know if Gil...
I think it would be wise for us to put this Q&A up on our website. We are going to do a webinar, but I think it's important for us, as soon as we have the final details all resolved around the schedule, around a lot of these questions that's hard to answer right now before the MOU's in place, that we have the ability to make that happen right after that. I think there's great questions being asked tonight. I think there's good answers being provided tonight. So I think, as we did on August 10th, when there were others presenting to the board, we made this webinar available to folks the next day. I would imagine we'll do the same thing with what is happening tonight. And then we'll continue on with more of this tomorrow. I think there's plans to have another one up on Thursday and just continue the communication.
All right. Should we, at this point, we have like several people who have raised their hand and been waiting patiently. Should we let them ask their question?
It's fine with me.
It's a good time, yeah.
Have we figured it out yet?
I think we have. Lori, do you have the folks that have? Lori, I think you're on mute.
Hello?
Oh, hello?
Hi, this is actually Adam Moore.
Oh, hi, Adam.
Hi. So my name is Adam Moore, and I'm a father of a third grader in Evergreen School District. And I want to talk about sacrifice. There's a lot of talk about sacrifices that need to be made in a time of a national emergency. There's talk about how in the grand scheme of things, online school is a small price to pay to save lives. Often a war analogy is used with this fight against COVID. We're at war with COVID, they say, but this analogy is wrong, because unlike war, where soldiers risk their lives so society and our way of life can continue, with COVID, we're asked to sacrifice our way of life so we can risk nothing. Life is a contact sport with risks. If any level of risk is unacceptable, we will never see full-time in-person school again. This will be the death of face-to-face school forever, because there will always be some new virus that poses some risk. With online-only schooling, we are sacrificing children, especially disadvantaged children, to protect the few and the old. Once teachers get a taste of working from home, they will never go back. And why would they? Why would they want to go back? Aside from COVID, we have made it impossible for educators to discipline kids. My daughter's entire class had to evacuate the classroom because one child was throwing a tantrum multiple times last year. And we just keep making it harder for teachers to deal with children that are acting out. Once this burden is lifted with online-only school, and given the likelihood of continued outbreak of COVID and other novel viruses that occur any given year, teachers will love to work from home. This meeting has gone on for over 2 hours, and what concrete details have parents obtained? Aside from administrators patting each other on the back of what a great job you're doing, parents still know nothing about the details. Teams and flow charts and ideas have not materialized into details. Good intentions are not details. What does a specific day of school look like? What is the teacher's expectation? What is the student's expectation? What is the parent's expectation? How will you measure success with these objectives from above? Words like synchronous, design tools and collaboration, lean in so parents can rely on, parent-facing pages, models, reached out, talked about, conversations, it's my hope, if needs be, modularized forms. These are words without meaning that are abstract, designed to avoid the obvious. There are no details. These are flowcharts of flowcharts. As parents know what kids need, it isn't more screen time. Less than a month from school and after months of preparation, you are not ready to adequately teach or provide details at all. I asked the school board to respect the overwhelming majority that responded to surveys and call for in-person schools as an option. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Adam, for your comments. All right, Lori, is there someone else that has their hand raised?
Yes, we have Adam Aguilera.
All right, Adam, you're up.
Julie, maybe we should review the time limits.
Oh, yeah. People that have their hands raised, just make sure that you keep your comments just to under a few minutes, 3 minutes, and make sure that you state your name and your address for us too, for the record. Adam, are you there?
Oh, we'll go on.
Oh, there he is.
Yes, I had submitted a letter. I had not expected to speak to it.
I can read your letter later in citizen comments because I did receive it.
That's fine. Thank you.
Or do you want to do it, or did you want to say something now?
I can go ahead and have you read it. Thank you.
Okay.
Stacy Reinbach. So the next one is Stacy Reinbach.
Hi, Stacy. Go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, I apologize. My hand was raised on accident.
Oh,
okay.
That's okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. All right.
The last one is Geraldine Shutt.
All right. All right, Geraldine, whenever you're ready.
No.
She'll need to unmute her mic as well.
Yeah, Geraldine, are you with us? If you are, you're on mute. Nope, looks like we lost her.
Okay, so I guess we'll go back to the other question, sorry.
All right, and again, I'm gonna just reiterate that if there's some questions that we've already answered, we're probably gonna move on to some of the other ones in the interest of getting through all of them and being able to answer the variety of questions. Next one is just a comment. It says, thank you to each of you for all your thought and care that's gone into planning for remote learning. I realize it's not easy for anyone. I agree, there has been a lot of thought and care. All right, what requirements have to be met to shift from remote 2.0 to the hybrid model? And I'm gonna preface this that there are now becoming a lot of questions about that. So maybe an overview of kind of the thought of from remote 2.0 to what gets to the next level.
So I will start this by saying we haven't been given, in my mind, real clear and direct guidance from the beginning from the state. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk. I'm just saying it's the governor put out phased plans, how counties would move through phases, but they kept schools separate from that. And then at that point in time, districts were kind of pushing to follow the phases, the phase model. And but they resisted that. And it wasn't until recently that the Department of Health actually put out some recommended kind of I think it was kind of a flow chart that you'd consider how you would return to school, whether that be as in-person, hybrid, or full. And they tied it primarily to the number of cases per 100,000 in a county. If you were a county that was over 75 cases per 100,000, that situation would be one where there still would be the ability for remote learning. They would kind of advise remote learning, but you could still have students on site in certain situations. If you're in the moderate 25 to 75 per 100,000 cases, then you would advance with some further hybrid. And then if you got to below 25 per 100,000, it would be more in line with the idea of bringing kids back beyond the hybrid. Our county superintendents have worked together, I think, through the whole pandemic. We had looked at phases 1 and 2 being remote learning. When a county got to phase 3, it would potentially open up the door to a a hybrid learning situation. But each step through the phases would be met with a period of weeks where you'd look and review where the cases were and what were the trends, working with the Department of Health. So all of that to be said, that there isn't any clear guideline that says this is how you move out of it. I feel like for us, we have the ability in phase 2 to have students in groups of 5 or less. The Department of Health guidelines give instruction around having kids even in the over 75, which they would consider high transmission. They would allow for still students on site. So I really feel like for us, we need to have students in those groups of 5 or smaller as soon as we possibly can and help us work through the protocols. I think that obviously we need to see what happens health-wise in terms of the cases and the trends. I think another one that was in the phases approach from the governor was not only just the number of cases in the community, but it was also hospitalizations. What was the capacity of hospitals, whether or not hospitals were over certain metrics just in general, and then how many individuals were actually in hospitals related to COVID-19. So they have repeatedly talked about it's a local decision. I think that the only way you can get to having more than 5 kids is having 5 kids. I don't think it's a short-term thing, but I think we have to learn from our experience. We have to see what the trends are. We have to work with Dr. Melnick, with the county, and we have to follow the safety of our students and of our staff. But whenever we can get our students on site, we need to do that as soon as we possibly can, safely.
All right, thanks, Mike. The next question is, has the board already voted to approve distance learning? And I guess I could take that one unless one of my fellow board members wants to answer that question, but I guess the answer would be no. The next part of our agenda this evening is the resolution about our district reopening plan. So I guess that's where we would have the discussion and make that decision. Does everyone agree with that answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's very next, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, Rob, did you have something you want to?
No, you pretty much said what I had planned to say.
Okay.
I'll just tap the button and we can move to the next.
Okay. Will elementary teachers in a grade level be required to teach the same lessons in the same way at the same time, or will they have some flexibility and be able to use their best judgment for student learning?
So you may have heard me describe that we have a process and a structure and time provisioned for teams to do some collective design work to divide the workload and leverage the shared capacity of the team. That being said, always the job of the teacher is to match the teaching to the learners. So I would say that although we are trying to reduce variance by providing guidance about what content stays, what content can go, and how we are leveraging our known routines for students inside the classroom, what that looks like, et cetera, et cetera. The last phase after a team meets together and designs together is some personalization by the teacher before, and some special consideration about the unique needs of his or their teacher, or their students, sorry.
Thanks, Erin. Question about hybrid learning. When we do go to a hybrid model, when and if that happens, what will happen to students who refuse to wear a mask?
I mean, the guidelines that we have from the state is that students wear masks. So I would imagine that we wouldn't allow them to stay at the school. We would have to work through that if they refuse to wear a mask.
Next two questions I'm going to combine because they both have to do with Wi-Fi. The first one is about buses going to be equipped with Wi-Fi and sent to areas where students don't have Wi-Fi. And then the next question that was submitted by someone else was, are there plans for additional hotspots for students in need?
Yes, I can answer that one. So we're part of 1 Million Project. So we're working with them. They're trying to get internet access to families or students all across the country. It originally was a high school program. Now it's K-12. So we have 400 hotspots. They will be at the schools. As families have a need, they'll be passed out by the school, at the school, by the school, the same way that they would pass out a device. As well, the FCRCs, McKinney-Vento are programs that are working with different groups of students that are maybe more mobile or whatever case might be. We're hoping that that's a part of it as well. So it's kind of a partnership with the FCRCs and McKinney-Vento folks that are supporting students who are in transition. As far as the buses, no, there won't be, at this point, there's no Wi-Fi on the buses.
Okay, thank you, Brian. This one again about the hybrid model. If students or staff test positive for COVID, will the whole class have to be quarantined for 14 days, or what will this look like? I would imagine we would go by whatever's recommended through Clark County Public Health at that point.
Correct. They would work with us on exposure, and we would work with families through that. It really is kind of a case-by-case situation. But the individual that actually, if there was somebody that tested positive, of course, they would be quarantined. And what Dr. Melnick alluded to was anybody that was within that social distancing 6 feet situation for 15 minutes or more, even if it wasn't 15 straight minutes, it's 5 minutes here, 3 minutes here, 10 minutes here. That was kind of the direction that we received from him. So it's honestly something that we would work through on a case-by-case basis. You might have one exposure, wouldn't necessarily require the whole school to be quarantined. It really would be conversations with the county health department.
Next question is, why do teachers have 7 more safe schools to take? I don't know that I understand that.
It sounds like a working conditions question.
I think that might be the Safe Schools online training. I'm not sure the answer to that. If that's what it is, I know that they're just being asked to take whatever training.
Like online training.
Right, online training. I think that's probably what it is.
I think it's our HR department manages the trainings that need to be accomplished on a yearly basis per policy and per law. And so they would assign those. And then in addition to that, there are specific trainings related to COVID and understanding of symptoms and how to respond to that are out through that system too. So.
Question about the school day, that if they heard correctly, that the school day is going from 9 to 3?
The school day will follow the school hours. The day will look different in that it's not packed from school hour to school hour, 9:10 to 3:50 for certain elementary schools, or 8 to 2:30, but we will follow school hours so that when we go back to hybrid, that's a seamless transition. So the schedule that when we do post it will give a day within the school hours.
Can I ask a follow-up about that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's I can't remember whether I saw this on another district or ours, but if a portion of the day is scheduled for asynchronous work, would there be an expectation that the student be logged in or something during those hours? Or if they don't need the assistance of teachers, could they be working on that like homework later on in the day or before the next day begins?
Yeah, and when we say the school hours, they're not online for all of those hours. There will be synchronous sessions, and then there's asynchronous sessions. During the asynchronous sessions, it may be independent work time that I'm doing off the computer. It might be I get pulled in for some small group time. So when we're talking about synchronous, we're talking about whole class live session. Asynchronous can be independent work. It can be some small group work, but it's not necessarily, we're not sticking the kids on a computer for 6 hours straight to watch Zooms or Google Meets.
I think that's important to say. I have a high school sophomore who's kind of leery about the idea of doing that each day. And I kind of agree because it's hard.
Right.
But it's more that the staff and the support services are available during those hours than that they must be present for all 6 in a chair. Is
right.
that right?
And again, we're not taking attendance that way. So the kids, as they move and do different things throughout the day, those asynchronous sessions do give them a break as well to get off that chair.
Thank you, Julie.
Next question is about if we notice classrooms or buildings that have not been cleaned thoroughly, who should we report that to? Is Sue still on?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, because
So
then I'm going to give this one to you, and then I'm also going to throw in that, because you answered the ventilation question, but there's a question that specific to Ellsworth.
Okay, so we have site-specific COVID monitors who will communicate directly with the site custodian if there is additional cleaning or additional touch points or any kind of issue at the school at all. So direct line of communication if there's any problems. I think the other question was specific to Ellsworth, right?
Yeah, but the ventilation, because it's an older school.
Yeah, so we do have older schools. That's one of the reasons why Ellsworth is being replaced. And our maintenance team has recognized that they'll be following the same protocol, starting the equipment 2 hours early and then adjusting the dampers to allow for as much outside air as possible and still be able to condition the space. Ellsworth has the cabinet heaters in the perimeter with electric heat and cooling. They are inefficient systems, and our maintenance team is all over it, making sure that we can maximize outside air.
Thanks, Sue. Next question. This one is about high school and middle school levels. If there's a way for them to do some activity groups to meet virtually. So if they can't meet in person, could they still do some of their activities, clubs, maybe virtually?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of the clubs that we have that continue yearly, whether they're service clubs or academic clubs, as well as other pieces, we're going to have to rely on and dig back into the staff and figure out what can they do, because that's also, you know, their time and what is the what's the expectation on that. But as many things as we can offer to kids as possible, again, for that social emotional need and connections, we're going to try to do.
Then the next question is about, will teachers be expected to use Google Classroom for their LMS?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. With social distancing, will students that will be accessing services in person, building possibly be at other sites than they traditionally attend? Would it be alternating schedules at the same sites? Does someone want to take that question?
Yeah, I don't think that we have discussed accessing services at different sites, so it would be per their building unless there was a need, but that hasn't been in our talks.
Next question is physical education. Will it be a requirement in high school?
Yes, it continues to be a graduation requirement.
Once we're able to bring small groups into the buildings, will teachers need to teach virtually and in person? What will that look like?
We'll never ask a teacher to teach virtually and in person at the same time. So the schedule is built to provide opportunities for blocks of time for teachers to meet virtually. And then when we bring small groups in, separate groups of time to meet students in person. They wouldn't do the same at both at the same time.
The next question is about what about playground supervisors? I think that kind of falls into what Mike talked about earlier. Mike, did you want to add anything on that?
I mean, I would just say that in situations where we don't have recess occurring or playground activities occurring, I think that that's part of the conversation with PSE about potentially reassigning folks when we have openings. And I mean, we want to try to keep our staff employed. At the same time, if we don't have kids at school, it's as I said earlier, depending on the enrollment and our funding, it's difficult to continue something that that particular job for a period of time is not, it's not happening. So we need to work with our with the PSC leadership and kind of work through some of these issues.
All right, question about if the school gets to go back to the classroom, how long of a lead time will be given before that happens?
I think that in our conversations, it's been a situation where, like, when you looked at the phases, you maybe could potentially move from one phase to another. You needed to remain in a phase for 3 weeks, and over that 3-week period of time, you saw what was happening with trends, whether things are improving or getting worse. So I do think that there would be a period of weeks that we would be at a certain level, and then we would make adjustments from that. It's not something that's going to be one night we're doing it one way and then the next day we're doing it a different way. There'd be time. It'd be a matter of weeks. We would be transitioning from one level, potentially from one level of 5 kids to 10 or whatever. I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but it would be a period of weeks as you work through that.
Will there be support from the high school to help students with college applications?
Yeah, the high school counselors will be available to help with that. They could be made appointments with them, as well as career center secretaries that help with scholarships. So those services are available to kids.
Perfect. The next one is about how will Running Start work?
Running Start works the same that it has. Running Start has already said that they're fully virtual. So students that are doing Running Start are continuing in that program. And if they have part-time Running Start, we still have the same partnerships with them. And if someone has specific questions about like their kids' Running Start schedule, they should contact their counselors when they're back.
The next question goes back again to if we have to make adjustments in staffing due to layoffs, how many employees may be lost if and when the schools reopen. Probably the concern is around having adequate staff to handle the students once they come back to the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely something that we have to also be aware of and pay attention to. In particular, one of the reasons that we've pushed so hard for funding to continue and for our district and districts in the state to be held harmless, particularly around transportation. Obviously, getting students to and from school is a significant part of what happens on a daily basis, and that's not to diminish the significance of what everyone does, but there are certain requirements with respect to driver's license, CDLs, and things like that. So obviously that's part of the consideration also, is the kids will come back, and when they come back, we have to have the ability to staff our buildings at the same time. So all of these things are considerations, no question about it.
Is the district going to provide a list of people who can tutor students?
I think the silence on that means at this point, I know we do have a tutoring program that we've used in the past, but I don't see anybody rushing to, there we go, Brian.
I was just going to say, when you see the next question around, intending in person and size of groups, is it from the district or the state? Maybe Clarissa could talk about that as far as what that could look like and how we decide that, because that directly relates to students' engagement and learning. So it kind of answers both.
Okay. Paras are hearing rumors that bus drivers are going to be filling the paras positions. I think Mike covered that earlier, and that's some of the talks between ourselves and PSE. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't heard that rumor.
We do have a comment from a teacher that says that just wanted to respond to the citizen comment we got from Adam Moore, that as a teacher, she says, I do not want to work from home. I want to teach remotely from my classroom to start, and I look forward to teaching kids in the classroom from the classroom soon. I think this one was answered already. It's about who makes the decision. I think that it's all local decisions about the size of groups, but we have been getting the questions about who makes the final decision. Students can attend in person and size of groups. Is it?
Yeah, I think that we've been looking at the 5 or less from the perspective of the phase that the county is in, where the number was 5 or less. At the same time, they aren't specifically limiting that. The guidelines from the state talk about social distancing and making sure that there's appropriate social distancing in the classroom. So that's why there could be increases in those students, particularly as we see the trends from the county health department. But the state has pretty much left it up to a local decision.
I think we answered this one too about extra support if students need help while their teacher's busy. I don't know, Jay, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, so we do plan on providing, for special education, we do plan on providing our paraeducator support at the level that can be done within the classrooms in remote and when we are able to bring in small groups. And so yes, we will have additional support necessary for students with disabilities to access.
This person writes in and says, this might be a silly question, but how will the library work and will the kids be able to check out books? I don't think it's silly at all. I think that reading's super important and we need to get books in our kids' hands. So who wants to take that one about library checkout?
Yeah, library checkouts are going to happen. I just had a meeting with some teacher librarians today and talking about what does that look like? What's the process? But our goal is to get books in kids' hands. So we have to talk about material distribution, whether it's pickup, whether we can mail the books to families, and different opportunities to get books in kids' hands, but they will definitely have an opportunity to check out books.
Julie, could I ask you, I'm sorry, could I?
Go ahead, Rob.
What about kids getting their hands on the classroom sets, like the Fontes and Pinnell reading classroom sets? Would it be possible to have those books somehow checked out to students who are in those right grades?
Yes, for sure. And that's the thing. That's where we are talking about the remoteness or the robustness of Remote 2.0 is definitely systems to get the hardcover materials into students' hands, and the process in which we do that. You know, there's different plans in place, but kids don't just need tech in front of them, they need the book and the paper. And so that's a big part of the next phase.
The next question is almost the same. Does somebody have something?
I just was going to notice that the next question speaks to that, and I would just add that math manipulatives and any tools that we can get in the hands of kids that support their learning that are beyond digital or after. So we are providing some guidance on that and some routine protocol for how to get those in kids.
And then the next question is to clarify, can school clubs meet in person following guidelines? So I guess right now, Mike just mentioned the guideline is 5 or less. Brian mentioned we've got some people going in the weight rooms in groups of 5 or less. Could that happen with school clubs?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, we would want to make sure that we were coordinating that. So if that happens, it's with our awareness, because there's certainly real clear guidelines that would need to be in place in terms of what we're following with respect to the attestations, those guidelines, whatever we have in place for the athletics to work over the summer. I'm not saying we wouldn't have that opportunity, but we need to just make sure we've got it really well managed and to ensure everybody's safety.
The next question is about the FCRCs. Will they be open and available for students and families?
Yes, they're open. They're going to be open.
Okay. Any update from the state on expectation for the WA kids assessment in kindergarten?
WA kids will happen for kindergartners. They've extended the date by a couple weeks of when it needs to get done, but that will be an assessment that our kindergarten teachers will be doing with the students.
The next one I think we have covered because it's about what curriculum subjects in elementary school and how many minutes. I think we kind of covered that.
Yeah, I think we covered the minutes. I would just say one thing that we probably didn't cover is that our focus at elementary is on ELA and math at this time, and get that up and running, and to layer in science and social studies.
Another question about Wi-Fi challenges and how will 400 hotspots be enough? I heard about that it equals out to about 6 to 7 hotspots per elementary school. I'm shocked that we didn't allocate more money for our students in need.
And I guess I was responding last spring, we purchased 75 hotspots. They were very expensive and hard to get. And if there were more needed at the time, we would give those out. So I think 400 is enough. We have another 75. So really we have 475. And if we need more, we will get more. What we found is some of the hotspots we gave out didn't get as much use as we thought they could. So we also know that we need to support those hotspots and support families so they can figure out how to use them or what works, because for some reason we gave hotspots out and some of them weren't used, which we see as just more of a support problem. And the other thing, the nice thing about this new 1 million project is if there's a family, the hotspot will support that entire family. So if there's siblings, and so you don't need, if there are 3 students in different schools, one hotspot supports everybody. So I think we're good with the hotspots, and if we need more, we will get more.
All right. Another question about laid off employees, about benefits and retirement.
Well, I would just say once you're in the retirement system, you're in the retirement system regardless. And I can't answer that question around benefits. There's a number of different programs that are available. And also part of it is kind of waiting to see what kind of comes out of the federal government with respect to the renewal of the stimulus program. But again, we'll be able to answer that question very soon.
Okay. Another question about teachers and delivering live instruction via Zoom, or if lectures can be recorded ahead of time, or is that still being held up by the MOU or the working conditions? And I would say that that's probably still being decided.
And the instructional guidance includes both live instruction and recorded instruction. The definitions around how much of each will be decided in the MOU.
This question, and this one, I actually thought of this question myself earlier this week about elementary students and knowing when to log back into their classroom because they're not skilled at watching the clock. So what would our answer to that one be?
I think we are going to learn a lot about this. I think one of the intentions in the design of the schedule is to build as much routine as possible into an elementary student's day. So we're actively trying to think through that and understanding that that is a difficulty, and the more that we can routinize that that schedule and experience for a student, the better off we will be. And another point just of clarification is when we talk about synchronous or live and asynchronous or taped or pre-packaged, that doesn't always look like a student going in and out of a whole group experience. So there's opportunity, right, within that to hopefully limit and support our students and families as we know that they will need.
There's a question about if lessons can be delivered on thumb drives if students have no internet access, and I think we've answered that question about making sure that our kids have hotspots. People want to know if would it be possible to have them meet the parent-child in a socially distanced setting, similar to how we have done with, school barbecues. Probably not the school barbecue, but this seems important for elementary. Could greatly impact engagement. So meeting their teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important for our kids to be able to meet their teachers. So I would say that that is our goal, but we have to kind of figure out the details specifically around that. It's like, I mean, it's a very, we're just in a, it's an interesting time.
All right. Are weight rooms open to all students or just football players?
All students at the high schools and middle schools. It was a summer program, so it wasn't a football program.
Okay. An elementary learning support teacher, I want to be able to meet with my students in small groups. Will I be able to start the school year meeting with small groups according to guidelines?
So we're gonna partner with our families, follow the metrics, look at the guidance, and I think it's clear to say that we all want to enable that to happen, and as soon as we possibly can, we will. And I appreciate Penny's support and desire to do that, and want to support her in that as one of my folks, and we'll get to that as soon as we possibly can.
Thanks, Jay. And then here's another teacher here responding to our citizen comment earlier. We want to be in the classroom with our kiddos. We are people too with kids of our own. We want to be safe and healthy. We also worry about the health of our students. We know the longer kids are out of the school, the more difficult it will be once back in the classrooms, but we still want to be in the classroom with our sweet kiddos. So just a comment there. At the end of the year, a lot of credits were waived for students, seniors graduating. Will some of these waivers be happening again? Will there be more options available for students to meet some of these requirements? Will there be more options for students to test through and out of classes? I think I need to turn my light on soon.
At this point, we don't have waivers for classes. Like in the spring, we're starting with full curriculums.
Right. Any thought been put into outdoor schooling? During the Spanish flu, they opened classroom windows and took classes outside. Is this being explored?
I think we would use the outdoors potentially, no question about it, but it's not an exclusive outdoor school situation that we're looking at.
Another question about classified employees. You mentioned that you want to try and keep people working. In the spring, classified provide a variety of services and supports: Camp Evergreen, food distribution, FCRC, item distribution, supply distribution, online student support. I mean, the list goes on. Will classified have similar duties as the spring? Or will primary focus be working with students?
I think one of the things that I mentioned earlier was that in the spring, we were held harmless on revenue, and it allowed us flexibility to use our transportation system to support meal distribution. Again, they have not given us anything concrete that would lead us to believe that that is the case again. And our funding system is built around transporting students, not transporting meals. So it would be a situation where we would be transporting meals without any funding to pay for that. I think it's a difficult situation. We will, and we won't be running a childcare the way that we did in the spring. That was something that was specifically asked and requested of school districts to do with some of those funds by the governor and by Superintendent Reichdahl. That is not continuing. So I think we will use classified staff in a number of different ways, but not as daycare providers and not transporting meals unless there's some last minute direction from the state indicating that we will receive, be held harmless in our transportation funding.
All right, we have made it through all of the questions. So at this time, unless there's any other questions from the board members that have come up during this time, but we'll have an opportunity to ask some questions and comments in the next section of our meeting agenda. But unless you guys have some follow-up questions about any of those that we just received, we can move on to the next part of our.
Yeah, Julie had a question about.
Their hand raised.
We have a hand raised.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's one.
Okay, Angelique, is that right? Did you have a question or a comment for us?
Still muted.
Angelique, you're muted, and I don't know if you had a question for us.
We're not able to unmute her on our end, Julie.
Okay. If you had a question for us, you're on mute. Well, should we move on?
I had a question about grading.
Okay, go ahead, Rob.
Julie, I wanted to ask Julie Tumulty about a standard based on individual proficiency in work and not timing, not behavior grades, et cetera. How does that compare to mastery-based or standards-based grading for the A to F secondary system?
We don't have a mastery-based system in secondary, but I think what all the work that CNI has gone into is really prioritizing the standards. And so when we're talking about assessment and what we're doing in school, that we have our assessments and other graded work that's tied to the standards. So having the teachers go through a really thoughtful process about what is it that we're having doing, what is it that they're turning in, what's the feedback loop, and tied to those standards. While it's not a standards-based system, we're basing it off the priority standards.
Thank you. Do you have data, and if you don't have it to hand, that's okay, about the proportion of students that received incompletes through the spring, or maybe this is a good question for the next session, but whether that data is available by race or ethnicity or income level?
I haven't pulled that data.
Okay.
We have it, I mean, we can pull it by student and then we'd have to dig down to the granular level, but it's not pulled that way.
Okay, thank you.
All right, a couple other comments that just popped up. There's been a lot of talk about spring, how it didn't work. Somebody wants to recognize YE 7th grade Spanish teacher, Amy Matsumoto. Did I say that right? My daughter never missed a class, all on her own doing. She was engaged with the kiddos. I believe this is a testament how Amy engages with her kids in and out of the classroom. Thank you to her and the YE staff for doing the best they can in the most unpredictable circumstances. Thank you for your comment. Next one is thank you, board, Mike, and ESD leadership for all your hard work. On behalf of our students, I hope all of us choose to take positive action in the educational process and not just point out perceived shortcomings. Thank you for your comment there. Next one, just pointing out that all of us adults are struggling to figure out this webinar. Just imagine kids trying to figure out the technology and the new learning. And then someone else, just want to say thank you to the board and staff that have been working so hard on this. Thank you for your comment. All right, so we will go ahead and move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is resolution number 6385, Evergreen School District Reopening Plan. So at this time, I'm going to call on Mike to explain the resolution.
Yeah, the resolution is the resolution that the state is requiring school districts, boards approve 2 weeks prior to the first day of school, attesting to the plan that we have. There are whereases with respect to boards governing school districts and Governor Inslee declaring a state of emergency, and that OSPI sets rules and regulations. But basically what you're doing is approving the resolution that allows the district to move forward its plan, share with the state that we're moving forward with the remote learning plan. And that document that Julie initially went through, I think 6 hours ago, or maybe not quite that long ago, a little bit ago, that went through the answers with respect to the health and learning plan. And it does say that with at least 2 weeks before school starts that we should post the actual detailed specifics. So that would mean that by the 17th or thereabouts, we would need to have that completed. Our intent is to get an MOU in place so that we can get that released hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week. So we understand that there's that timeline to get some of those specifics available. But again, to be clear, it's starting the year in a remote learning plan as we have been discussing for the last couple weeks.
All right, thanks, Mike. I'm going to now open it up for the board members to make their comments, ask questions, and I'm going to let someone else talk for a while.
I first want to thank all of you for the hard work. I know this has been grueling for months now, and it's challenging because we're dealing with stuff that we've never faced before, and so there's no easy guideline or path to know the perfect way to deal with this. But I think the fact that I know all of you and I know the board is wanting to put the needs of children first. I did want to clarify something that I'm seeing a lot of comments in social media and such about the motivation the motivation to whether we have remote learning or in-school learning. And there's been a lot of conversation about that being political, or that teachers don't want to work as hard, that's why they would do remote. I mean, there's been a lot of things, and people need to stop that. It is just not the case. This has never been political to any of us. We're here about our kids. This is a local issue that we're dealing with in the best way that we can, given the information that we're being given from the experts in this. So I just kind of want to put that to rest, because our teachers want to work. Our teachers are motivated to get with their students as quickly as possible. We're not being managed by the union. We're just working with them so everybody can be safe at school. So I just kind of want to put that out there. Thank you. I needed a little moment.
Thank you, Vic.
Mm-hmm.
I have to echo Vic's comment about that. I wrote it tonight in an email to Mike. Is that, and where did I put that? Because what I said was important. This is difficult, sometimes thankless, tiring work. There isn't anything about it that's known, and there are so many uncertainties. And I want to thank you all for the way you're pulling for students and their families. This is not a time anybody anticipated, and there's literally no specific precedent or a lot of established expertise for creating a system like this. The restart model looks really good to me, and I really appreciate the added data that we got tonight, and the presentation, and the time that we've taken to answer what comes to 92 questions now, in addition to the verbal commentary. The professionalism and dedication to families and students really just shines through in these moments. The guidance that we got from the state health department that identifies 75 cases as a maximum moderate thing, or as a maximum level for distance learning, and maybe expanding to a better hybrid model. That's a true countywide number, but as I look at the zip codes that our district is around, the county is still reporting more than 150 cases, new cases averaged over the last 2 weeks. And so we might still be in the high risk, if I'm interpreting the data correct, which really supports the full remote model for the start of the year. It's not fun. It's not ideal. And so many people want to get back to normal. And I know I'm feeling tired too. But we have to do this for the safety of the kids, and we have to let the process with our employee groups play out so that they have their voice in how we set things up. I'm hoping with Mike that the details come as soon as possible so that parents can have the same kind of certainty that I know I'm looking for. But Julie and Brian and their teams today certainly added certainty for me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I wanted to say real quick 2 things. One is that we, as superintendents in the county, are working hard to try for that transparency that you're talking about, because we get like a daily report from the county emergency operations center. Then you've got the state Department of Health. You've got county Department of Health around the state. And what we're really pushing, we're going to talk with Dr. Melnick tomorrow, is the daily, what is that number? What is that case number on a daily basis, not on a 3 or 4 day lag? There should be one place that people in the community can go and see what that is. And not just the case, but all of the metrics, because there's 2 of the 5 metrics that we're already in the right spot on, 3 we're not. And so it's important for them to have that, be transparent, and have that information, because there's a lot of, I mean, there's just been skepticism around this from a wide variety of people from the beginning. And so it's the best way to deal with that is by providing good information. And the second thing I want to say is not only, you know, everybody on the Zoom and others that we have in administration, but I want to specifically thank the C&I specialists that we have and the TOSAs that work in the C&I department that have worked all summer with Aaron, with Julie, with Clarissa, Brian, with Jay, with everybody to help make this happen. They've done a great job, and they continue to do that. I want to point them out as well. So I know I'm not.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said Mike and your team, because I left out of the org chart. We'll start with Julie. So many people who've been working so hard this summer. Thank you so much.
I think the other thing too that's kind of solidified my decision on this is just looking at the other examples across the United States. I mean, other districts that have started, you know, start school earlier than us and are now in a situation with kids getting sick and staff getting sick, and, you know, just the whole, you know, it's kind of nice that we're a month behind some of these schools so we can kind of see what happens. And it's not looking that great. And the other thing too, just we need our community to support the things that can bring this virus down so that we can get back into school. You know, as long as people aren't, you know, following the guidelines, this is going to drag out longer, and we want normal school back.
I would also like to just say thank you to everybody that this has been a lot of work, because not only have the curriculum, you know, going forward for digital, for reduced class sizes, but also having to go in and to see if we could continue with guidelines if we were to open classrooms, the square footage, how many kids. So there's been a lot of work. So, and thank you to everybody, even within the schools over the summer, the principals and staff. But also just want to point out that, you know, we are also parents of students within this district, and we're not naive to what is happening and what parents are feeling. You know, I have 3 children, young children as well, with special services. So it is not something that we don't understand and we don't feel as well. But as school board directors, we are elected by the community to make the best decisions that we can for the entire school district. That includes the teachers, the staff, the students, but also our community members at large. So if we've got students going into the schools, you know, we pulled them out of the equation early on in this outbreak. So to truly say that the data shows that students or kids don't get as infected or aren't as bad, it's really hard to kind of say that when we pulled them out of schools, and I know my kids haven't really gone anywhere. So it's not one student or one staff member's life is worth us, and if that potential is there, I think that the best decision is for us to close down until our community is at a place that we can open that safely. And this is not political for us. This is, we make these decisions with all of the data, all of the information, and what is best for everybody around us. Never political.
Yeah, the virus doesn't take sides. It just does its thing.
Jenny, I feel like you took the words like right out of my mouth. I was
Rachel.
Dang you. I was thinking so many of the exact same things. And, you know, to say that what I would want to choose as a parent facing the realities of trying to work and yes, sit with my child who doesn't know how to tell time and who is going to need me to log into the Zoom calls or the Google Meetups every single time, and choosing between my work and their work is not necessarily the same decision I would want to make as a board director, because I have so many more considerations than just my own child and my own work situation. And we have to think about everyone's needs, the community, our teachers, our staff, and especially our kids. And also, you know, what you said was what I was thinking, is that one life isn't worth it. And, you know, I would make this choice 100 times over as long as we don't lose the life of a child or a teacher or a staff member in our district from COVID, and it's preventable. So we are just making the best decision we can. And thank you all for helping us make that decision and doing all the work that you did do to make that decision, so that we can go forward with a lot of information and know that we're doing the best thing that we can possibly do for our community.
Great. Thank you all. I just want to tell everybody that I really appreciate the comments, the emails we've received. We do take all of your feedback seriously. We read everything. And I want people to know that the board and Mike and the team, we've been talking about this for months. I mean, really, since last spring when we had to go to remote learning, you know, suddenly, and things were happening, you know, making sure that kids had meals, and then making sure that the online learning was starting, and then the plans for this upcoming school year. These conversations have been happening for the last 5.5, 6 months. And I think that I'll just reiterate what everybody said. We don't take the decision lightly. We have taken everything into consideration. We do want kids back in classrooms. We feel like that's where the best learning takes place, because we have such talented staff that, you know, we know that that's what our kids need, but we also know that we need to take things slow and proceed with caution, and get to a place where our plan is in place. Things will be fluid a little bit. And like we said earlier during the question and answer time, we will have more information soon. The webinar is going to go out with some of the question and answers that will be posted on our website. So we plan to communicate this out fully so people know what's happening.
And can I say thank you to the board? Because one of the things some people, I mean, we've got a number of people that have logged in today, and there's some people that log into all of these meetings, but the board's worked all summer as well. So I think we've had maybe one Tuesday all summer where we didn't have a meeting where we were talking and getting updates and sharing thoughts and opinions on what was happening. So it's not just our staff. Everybody has been part of this. I think using the term team is a good way to do that. And I just want to make sure that you're recognized as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments from the board members before we make a motion to approve resolution number 6385? All right, then we will entertain a motion
Director
Move that we-
Grunwald moves that we approve resolution number 6385, the Evergreen School District reopening plan. Sorry, Rob, I cut
Second.
you off again.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. It's an aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Ginny?
Aye.
Rachel?
Hi.
All right, it's been approved. Again, thank you to everybody for your work on this, and we'll continue to keep everyone updated. All right, so the next part of our agenda is the public hearing on the budget. Before we start, does anybody need a couple of minute break?
Please.
Okay, we're gonna take just a couple minutes, okay?
Okay.
Be right back.
I have to see who's back. I can't see everyone now.
Oh, did I mess you up?
That's all right. I'll just,
Yeah, let's see. Oh, there we go. I can see. Ginny's not back. Rachel's not back yet.
yeah.
I think now that we
Ginny's
move on,
back.
now that we move on
There's
to the
Rachel.
budget conversation, everybody, I don't know if anybody's coming back.
Here, I was just hiding.
We still
You know
have
how-
91 attendees.
Well, there you go.
All right, so the board is back, Mike's back, so that means I think we will start with the budget presentation.
Okay. Let's see if oh, that doesn't work real well, does it? Hold on, I'm going to try something else here real quick. I am going to try to screen share this, but see if I can do this in a way that actually works. I almost push leave. Is that something I have an option to do? Leave the meeting? Okay, now I got to see if this will jump around for me because it's not really, there we go. Okay, I'm going to do it this way. It might not be as big, but for some reason it wasn't working in the actual slideshow. So,
Mike, if you could maximize PowerPoint to make the image bigger enough, or did you already do that? Oh, you already did that. Okay, so I got to figure my own thing.
Yeah, my issue is when I started it from the beginning, and then hit the thing, it wasn't thumbing through it. So I'm going to do it this way, and it's going to be hard to see. So I'm going to talk through some of these pages. The first thing I want to say is that we are budgeting to start the year with a little over $27 million. Last year, we ended with approximately 23, and we had budgeted for a little bit of a decline in the budget in the 1920 school year. And then, as I've been kind of saying throughout the spring, when there was the closure, there were some natural things that allowed us to save some funds that led to a larger fund balance than what we would have expected. And I also have been saying from the beginning that that would help balance the budget in 2021. I think that 2021 and 21-22, even before all of this pandemic occurred and the state revenue shortfall, we were going to have some issues in 2021, 21-22. The closure did allow us, we saved some money in certain areas last spring around, with buildings closed, we saved some money in utilities. We saved money on sub costs. We saved money on extracurricular in the spring, field trips, extracurricular trips. And just generally, I've said it kind of jokingly, when people aren't in buildings, they tend to spend less money. So we did save some funds through the spring that led to this little bit larger fund balance than we expected. I think as we, so basically what we got budgeted here is that we start the year with around 27 million and that we end the year with around that same 23 million that we had when we went into the year. So we are planning on spending some of our fund balance as we move through the year this year. The next page, I'm assuming is going to be difficult to see. It's historical enrollment information, which shows us kind of at the high water point of 26,700 roughly head count in 2014-15. We're budgeting for around 24,400, well over 2,000 less that we've seen that kind of decline. We had basically what we've seen over the last few years anyway is just fewer kindergartners enrolling in the district. And as you move through the system with smaller kindergarten classes over time, you're going to flip that number somewhat. So it's not as if we're losing kids that are in the system. It's really more smaller classes coming in and then how that impacts us. It shows a decline of about little over 3%. The numbers for 1920 are somewhat skewed because we only had enrollment through March. And the state had to kind of extrapolate a figure for us the rest of the year in 1920. So that 25,000 number is probably a little higher than what we might have been at the end of 1920. My numbers for next year really look more like about a 2.5% decline in enrollment for 2021. And I'll talk a little bit about the impact on us. The next slide I'm going to show you is our special education program and where our numbers have been in special education. We basically are projecting flat numbers in special ed for 2021, even with an overall decline in enrollment. And you can see on the far right where you have the percentage of students in special education compared to the basic education. The state caps enrollment at 13.5%. At one point, they had capped it at 12.7. We were kind of pushing up against that in 15, 16, 16, 17. I expect us to be over that 13.5% cap. And what that means is kids, any special ed students that we serve that are over that 13.5% cap, that means we don't actually receive funding for those students. The next slide looks at our tax rates. For estimated tax rates for 21, our M&O rate at an estimated $1.72. We passed the technology levy for the first time in 2019. That rate's 42 cents. Our debt service levy rate is right at $1.74. It's been flat at that number for the last 3 years. Total tax rate locally $3.88 estimated for 2021. Again, before the McCleary fix, we were up around in the upper $4, in the upper $4.83, $5. So we're still quite a bit below those numbers. The state increased the state property tax when they lowered the local, but even with the increased state property tax, we're still below where we were 3-4 years ago in terms of the total tax rate. I'll just really quickly mention, and we'll talk about it more next week, but we did pass a bond in 2018. Next week we'll talk more about we've sold we've had two bond sales out of the $695 million that was authorized. We plan on selling more bonds in November to continue funding projects. We'll talk more about the timing and that next week. Okay, so next is to talk about assumptions. One of the things that's in the OEs in the operational expectations with boards OEs is to publicize the budget assumptions that went into the budgets. Enrollment is one of those assumptions, and then salary increases is another. You can see here our non-represented employee groups budgeted in the budget is a 2.5% salary increase. The Administrators Association increase is 3.3%. Our certificated staff EEA, which was negotiated in the spring with our teachers group, the 3-year deal that we agreed to, it's a 2.5% increase for all of our certificated staff. Our PSE groups, the 4%, those numbers were numbers that were agreed to in negotiations, not this year, but I think it was 2 years ago. I think that the next year's the 3rd year of the 3-year agreement, and 4% is what's in that agreement. And then our coaches contract also received the 2.5% CPI figure that we have. So the 2.5% represents the Seattle area CPI in those groups. And at any point in time, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. The next page is going to be another one that's going to be kind of hard to see, that has budgeted numbers. It's got actual figures for 18-19, budget figures for 19-20, and then what we're budgeting in 2021. And what you see at the bottom here is $355 million spent in 18-19, $373 million budgeted in 19-20, and $379 in 2021. The one thing that we do in Evergreen is meet individually with board members, either groups of 2 or 1 at a time, and kind of go into some conversations in depth in some of this. The one thing about 19-20 is that even though, like, if you look at that basic ed, the top line in here, it shows us spending $190 million in 18-19. We budgeted $198 in 19-20, and then again $198 in 2021. In 19-20, even though we budgeted $198 million, we're really only spending around $192 million. So it's kind of that natural progression: 190, 192. We're budgeting for 198. I don't anticipate us spending that large of an amount. But primarily what we see in the budget is increases around, and again, this budget was started in February of last year, even as early as January of this year. So January, February of 2020, back in the days where kids were in school every day. And, you know, it was developed in March and April as we were still anticipating returning to school in the fall. So the assumptions that went into this were really assumptions around what do we anticipate doing next year in a normal school year. And what I would say to that is the primary increases here really were around curriculum. We continued the Fontes and Pinnell second year of the 3-year adoption cycle. We also extended an adoption into middle school for ELA 6, 7, and 8. There were some changes around staffing with respect to the middle school schedule change. The middle school schedule change had a reduction in some of our certificated staff at the middle school level that were redistributed throughout the system. At the same time, we added some certificated staff in the elementary levels with respect to the ELL program, the way we're delivering our program there. But it was really a pretty straightforward budget. The next slide I'm showing is the federal program. And the federal programs are pretty straightforward. You have your Title I program, your IDEA special ed program. Again, pretty straightforward program with the federal program. And so ultimately it led to a total budget of around 390, little less than 391 million. One of the slides that we've shared for years with the board, actually since back when I was working with John Dieter in 0405, we kind of took a snapshot of how we spent money in 0405, kind of compared that to our most recent expenditure pattern for actual expenditures, which would have been 18, 19, and then what are the budgeted numbers in different activity areas. So you can see based upon this, how does Evergreen spend money based upon comparison to large districts our size as well as the state average. And what you see on this page is in 0405, we were spending about 69% of our budget in teaching and teaching support. We're up at 72.7. So that 3% shift, if you will, from teaching and support from 0405 to what you see in actual in 1819 and then in 1920, 3% represents over $10 million that's shifted from other areas in the district into our teaching program. And teaching support is things like the library, counseling, support, safety, professional development, curriculum, things like that. I think the reason we did this is the board had an idea, a belief that it was important for us to share with the community how were we spending our funds and making sure that the way we were spending our funds supported what their views were. You can also see central administration, we've always been below the districts of our size as well as the statewide average. So we're at a little over 5% for central administration. Building administration it includes what happens with our building administration as well as our building secretarial staff. So we are a little above the area there, but I think that we've done that specifically with an idea of making sure that we're providing the staff that we need to have to operate our school buildings appropriately. And you can see the different areas where we spend money in food services, maintenance, utilities, transportation, and other areas, and how we compare. We've, again, shared this slide since 0405. I know myself, I'm real proud of the fact that the district and the board has directed us to shift as much money and money into the buildings, because again, that's where all of this occurs. If it wasn't for the kids, we wouldn't be spending money. I'm going to talk about revenue, and I want to talk about some of the issues with respect to revenue, just kind of highlight a few things. The first thing that you see on there is local levy. And in the local levy, you see a number going from 37 million to 29 million to 33 million. It represents the impact of the McCleary decision. That 37 million was a year where we were transitioning from a higher levy to a lower. In 1920, the levy laws capped levy rates at $1.50 a thousand. They loosened that up in 2021, which is why that 29.8 is now 33.8. But if you look at the line right below that, levy equalization, in that process, we've talked a lot about the fact that our levy equalization was boosted for the 1920 and the 2021 school years when that levy vote took place to allow levy rates, instead of be capped at $1.50, to move to $2.50. Cleveland leveraged her vote to, at least for a 2-year period, drive some additional levy equalization funds to Evergreen and Vancouver. We had advocated for the whole county. At the end of the day, it distributed funds directly to Evergreen and Vancouver. But you see how that 16 million figure is dropping down to 12 million. So while our local levy has increased, our levy equalization is offset by the same amount. So we're seeing a decline there. As we look through a state apportionment, you can see where we're 224 million is what was budgeted in 1920, and we're budgeting 221 million in 2021. That reflects a enrollment decline, that 2.5% that I mentioned earlier. If you go a little further down, transportation, you see where we have budgeted for about 16.7 million. The two areas that we have the greatest concern are around enrollment. Understanding, when we budgeted enrollment is usually fairly predictable, and honestly, every year we've been within 100 or 200 out of the 25,000 kids. So when you think about that, we're within like 0.1% of that number. 1%, representing 250 kids. If you're off by 2%, you're basically talking about the enrollment in an elementary school. Well, we've got tremendous uncertainty right now with respect to the remote model and how families will react to that. We hear conversations about, kindergartners, the enrollment. The enrollment is actually down across the county, and I'm sure across the state with respect to kindergarten enrollment. But we are real uncertain with what that number is truly going to look like when we open up September 1st, and then when we do our first count. So just perspective-wise, 1% of our enrollment, if you think about 1% being roughly 240 kids. Well, 240, if you figure 300 kids is maybe 1.5%. 300 kids is for us about $2.7 million. It's a significant number. There are folks in the county that see 5% drop, even 10% drop. And again, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know that it'll be a 10% drop. We've budgeted for a 2.5% to 3% drop already, but at an additional 5% on top of that would be somewhere around 1,200 students, which would be the equivalent of something along the lines of $11 million. So there's a tremendous uncertainty around our apportionment. That's the biggest one. The second I mentioned earlier around transportation. I've never in all my time had a situation where our transportation revenue in any district I've worked at hasn't increased every year. We got preliminary figures. We received $16.4 million in 1920. Our preliminary estimate from OSPI is $14.8 million for 2021, so a $1.6 million decline in transportation revenue. That's an estimate we got just within the last few weeks. Not at all something that has been expected or would have been anticipated, since, as I said, we've never had a decline in transportation revenue. And that is before we talk about the fall count. The way that the funding formula works in transportation is you do a spring count, a winter count, a spring count, and a fall count. Last year's winter and spring counts are part of what we received this year. This year's fall count is the third leg. And that count is 25% of the estimate. So if you think about the 1.8 million that they've already reduced and then potentially a 25% decline of what we received this year, it could potentially be in excess of 5 million that we are looking at just in transportation. So there's tremendous uncertainty, not just in Evergreen, but in, I think, all districts in the county and in the state. And we are, I mentioned earlier some of the things we've done with respect to freezing positions. So we've got some certificated positions that we've frozen. We typically don't allow teachers to be released from their contract once you get to a certain point. We've been more amenable to that this year. We have those positions in classified that we had frozen that will help us. So it's just uncertain. It's very unnerving at this point as we look at the where we're at going through the year. On this page, the one area that I would point out that's helping under transfers, it's actually our technology revenue, the technology levy that we ran that the voters approved. We got half of that in the 1920 school year. We get the full allocation in 2021. So that will help us as well as we move through our situation this year. The next slide looks at enrollment, what our actual enrollment was for 1920, what our budget is for 2021. You can see we budgeted for a little over 200 students in elementary, 160 or so in middle school, and 120 roughly in high school. And then you can see the CPE numbers, the special ed numbers, the ELL. So we'd already budgeted for a fairly significant decline in enrollment, and we have to see how that develops and whether or not that number gets larger. Our budget has always been that enrollment drives staffing. You can see the staffing that we built in for elementary, what we budgeted for in middle and high school as well. So our total basic ed staff that was allocated, this doesn't include special ed, it doesn't include CTE, it doesn't include the Cascadia, all the other Title I LAP, other programs, because our total cert staff is probably more like about 1,700 plus. But our basic ed, we basically allocated approximately 1,140, and we staffed in the budget at about 1,145. That's another indicator that's in the budget. So the next slide is one of the things that the legislature did a few years ago was put in a requirement for a 4-year outlook. This first slide is just going to give you kind of, if we were looking at things typically, what would we be predicting for enrollment declines? So we still, even without the pandemic, our kindergarten classes, again, as I mentioned, are coming in they're smaller every year. So we still project in the F195F, which is the actual budget document around the 4-year outlook, we budgeted for an additional drop enrollment of approximately 2.7% over the next 4 years. We only have 4% revenue growth over that time frame, about 1% a year, and expenditure growth of a little over 3%, annual increases of less than 1%. I would highly anticipate that, I'm just thinking back, I've been around a while dealing with budgets, and in those years where there's been a significant state revenue shortfall, salary increases from the state level in those years have been frozen or delayed. I would anticipate those kinds of things being things we might see from the legislature when they get together in the spring. Again, they have an $8.8 billion shortfall, and they as yet haven't called a special session to come in and try to deal with that, whether that would be through an additional revenue or through expenditure cuts. So they'll come back in session in January, and we will be working with them and seeing what kind of recommendations they make. But that's why I say I think that there's probably a strong likelihood that they freeze salaries, would be my suspicion. The next slide looks at estimated fund balance. Fund balances over the next 4 years based upon this F195F. ending budgeted at 23.7. I could see that declining 21, 22, 22, 23, being in those low 20 million figures. We have a board requirement of a 5% reserve. That number is around 18 million. I think at these low numbers, because there's specific reserves for specific things, that 5% could be challenged. I think, again, the absolute uncertainty of where we're at right now is very unnerving with respect to enrollment. Because when you look at a fund balance of 27 million coming into the year and you talk about an unanticipated enrollment decline, it's just, these will be interesting, difficult decisions that we'll be facing, I would imagine. When we went through potential budget reductions in 09, 10, 11, 12, and even in the first spring that I was working in this role, they were all, Rob was on a committee that we started in October of the 08, 09 school year to prepare for 09, 10 cuts. We reconstituted that committee in the fall or early winter of 10, 11 for 11, 12. Here we are, and it's August 10th, 11th, I guess it is today. And we're uncertain of where we're going to be in terms of enrollment in September. And every day is one more day that we've spent dollars. I think that this board has been, and I've been the same way. I mean, we've been very upfront and transparent, and we'll have to continue to do that as well as we can when we see what those numbers look like. So I would just say, in all my time of working with school budgets, this is the most challenging and uncertain that I've faced. We'll come back to the general fund. I really quickly want to just mention these other funds. Capital Projects Fund, again, people see us spending money on buildings, on turf, on tracks, on roofs, on inside buildings with furniture and technology, and they're wondering, how can we do these things when we have this situation where we're concerned about cuts, but we're still spending. Understand the community passed a bond in 2018 authorizing all of these expenditures. We can't use those funds for anything other than the projects that were authorized in the board's resolution in 2018. So it is confusing, but we've said for years, bonds are for building, and the general fund is for kids and instruction. I know that there was another catchy line there, but I've forgotten it. So we're just gonna say bonds are for building. So what we're budgeting for in 2021 is $300 million worth of expenditures. I mentioned earlier that we will be selling an additional the plan is for an additional $275 million worth of bonds to be sold in the fall. We're completing the three elementary projects. We will be ramping up Mountain View and Y East. We'll be starting the work around the heritage additions and remodel. We're in the throes of Legacy High School, Hollingsworth Academy, the transitions program, the ASC. All the while, we've got all kinds of capital renewal projects going on right now. So there's a ton of work that will be ongoing in the Capital Projects Fund. And again, we can't spend those dollars any way other than in the Capital Projects Fund. The next fund, the Transportation Vehicle Fund, is a fund where we buy school buses. In the past, we've been transferring money from the general fund to help us accelerate bus purchases. We've suspended that the last few years to protect the general fund, but we still are able to spend money on buses. When we buy buses, they stay on a depreciation schedule for a period of years. When that depreciation schedule is done, we receive the full money to replace that bus. So we still have buses that are coming off the depreciation schedule. We will buy buses in 2021. That's why you see that expenditure. And again, these funds in this fund can only be used to purchase buses. We can't use those for any other way. ASB fund is from student body fees, athletics, clubs, fundraisers. The students determine how we spend that. You see a beginning balance of $1.5 million, revenues of around $3 million, expenditure of around $3 million. Those are budgets approved by student councils. The board doesn't make decisions around this. You just approve the expenditure level for the ASB fund. And then the last fund is the debt service fund. When we pass bonds, the voters authorize projects to occur. What they're really authorizing is us sell bonds to the public to finance projects. And the debt service fund is where we make payments on principal and interest. Like when you buy a house, you make principal and interest payments on your mortgage. This is basically when we sell bonds. We get a 18 to 20 year mortgage on paying those bonds off. And they're paid through the debt service funds. The revenues that come in are the taxes that we are able to levy to make payments on the bonds that are sold to pay the principal and interest payments. And again, this is a straightforward thing. That's kind of a quick conversation around all the funds. Today, we're just making an initial presentation. Again, we've had conversations with I've had conversations with the board. Myself and Jennifer Jacobson sat in on those meetings. Talking about the budget, and I've been able to answer some questions. You might have more questions tonight. I think the big thing to mention here, I just can't say it enough, just the uncertainty around our enrollment and whether the legislature will step in. I don't anticipate that they will step in to help us in any way with the state shortfall that they're dealing with. They don't have real options to help us. With all that being said, I'm going to stop sharing this screen so we can see each other more clearly and answer any questions you might have.
All right, well, thank you, Mike, for your presentation. And as you mentioned, we did all have an opportunity to meet with you one-on-one or two at a time to get our individual questions answered.
Yeah, I guess, can I say one more thing, Julie? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tonight, I'm presenting the budget. We don't formally approve the budget tonight. We will come back in 2 weeks where the board, if there are additional questions or if there's more questions from the community or any questions from the community, we would at that point in time address further questions. It wouldn't be until the board meeting on the 25th that the board actually would have a resolution to approve the actual budget.
Yes, but we will make a motion this evening to move forward this to a second reading or for the final adoption for the vote on the 25th.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this time, I'm going to ask Lori if anybody has raised their hand to ask questions or make comments about the budget only. If there's anybody out there that had a question from the audience that pertains to the budget only. And again, the same. I'm sorry.
Not at this time.
Not at this time? Okay. And I don't believe that there's anything written in the comment string that is new or pertains to the budget. So
that's correct.
Okay. So then we will call for a motion.
Julie, I move that we advance the budget proposal as presented to second reading.
Second, Victoria.
All right. So it's there's been a motion and it's been seconded. But at this time, we'll open it up for the board to ask questions or make comments about the budget presentation.
I appreciate that we were able to meet and talk and discuss the details one-on-one last week, Mike. And so I only have the one question. Sorry. We've been talking about declining enrollment, and does declining enrollment relieve any pressure on the transportation fund when it comes to replacing buses? Does it make the need less than we anticipate, or is that?
I don't. I mean, the only thing that would put reduce pressure on the need for buses would be like when we open new schools, like we will with at least Emerald. Potentially that reduces the demand in terms of having kids to need to be bused across neighborhoods. Kids that live closer are able to walk to school. So we would need to actually have fewer schools potentially, or make a policy decision. It's possible. I mean, you'd have to have a pretty significant drop in enrollment over time with the same number of schools to see a need for fewer routes potentially, but that's not something I see in the short term.
And so the percentage declines in enrollment don't have an impact on that.
I mean, I think it would over time if we drop 50% of our enrollment, but the small numbers that we're talking about here, even though they're big spread out over that number of schools, I don't see that impacting the number of buses we need.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just a comment. You know, Mike, you said, you know, in all the time that you've been on this, you know, looking at budgets, you've never seen anything like it. And I can second that. It is very concerning that there's so many unknown variables than what have ever had to deal with before. And that this is a totally moving target, which is not an easy position to be in from the financial side. So I know this is taking a lot of wrangling as we find out more as things go along. So I know you'll be keeping us apprised of this over time, but it is definitely something people should have some concern about. We just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be any meeting where we're not talking about the budget or we're talking about the response to the 2.0, and it's going to be dominated by those two topics, no question.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, well then at this time, it's been moved and seconded. We'll take a vote to accept the 2021 Evergreen School District 114 budget as presented for first reading, move it forward to the second reading. All in favor say aye. It's an aye for me. Victoria?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Jenny? You're on mute.
All right,
Oh,
that was
there you
all.
go.
Aye.
Rachel?
Aye.
Great. All right, it's we'll move on to our next meeting on August 25th.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. All right, we're going to move on to our agenda. The next thing is board comments, or these are comments by the school board. We actually have had quite a busy last couple of weeks, not only with meetings about fall planning, but we've had some other special events. So I'll let someone else jump in here.
Well, you talk about some of the statewide things I think we need to be aware of. Because we had our Director Area 6 caucus meeting about the legislative positions and the permanent positions proposed for the statewide School Directors Association General Assembly to be held in September. So we're not going to have the delegate assembly at the conference and a legislative assembly. We're putting it all together, and we're going to hold it on one virtual day that's right now scheduled for 12 full hours. I think it's Friday, the 25th of September.
Yes.
And the work behind that has been to try and front load and negotiate amendments that will be proposed in the assembly and consolidate those in some meetings between now and then. So we would have had a caucus meeting the day before the assembly, the legislative assembly, which took place today and had 3 districts from our director area in attendance. Julie and I were both there as representatives of the WASDA committees that we're on. But that window to propose amendments to the proposed positions opens on next Monday, I think, and is going to remain open for 2 weeks. So if we have some ideas or if a proposed position could use refinement, the last 2 weeks in August are the time to fill out the online form that WASDA's opened. They've assured us that it's all correct under rules of order and everything, but it should make the actual day of virtual sitting in chairs and voting on these positions go a lot less than 12 hours if we all give each other a lot of grace and understand the situation. And so I've got a lot of hope for that. But it's been pretty tiring getting that far. You may know that the November conference was called for virtual only, so we're not going to Spokane. And that's going to keep the WASDA stuff going that way for probably till the end of the calendar year, is that we won't be meeting for state work other than in a Zoom meeting. I wanted to just make a comment, because I was also aware through that work about OSPI's share of the CARES money. They have this came through the WASDA COVID-19 calls and was probably in one of the notes that I took. They're pretty sure at the state level that 90% of all the households in Washington have a cable TV connection, even if they don't have cable TV, and that there's money there to supplement the pucks with free internet for a year for free and reduced lunch kids and their families through the cable modems. They haven't given any more details other than to say, this is a fact and this is hopeful and this is what we plan to do. But if there's advocacy to offer about that, it would probably be a good idea to start talking. Other than that, and to repeat the gratitude that I'm feeling tonight for the report showing all the good, hard work that everybody's doing. Thank you again. And I feel like we're kind of coming out of some stages of grief here, maybe getting past depression and into acceptance now that we've been through all of this. And I'm glad to have a plan. I really am.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Hey, Mike, we had somebody put in a question having to do with the enrollment, that if it really drops because parents opt to homeschool or not enroll, how much of an immediate impact can that have and how quickly?
You're muted.
So I'll unmute first and then I'll start trying to talk. Everything that we receive in 2021, our funding for student enrollment is based upon the average for the year. So it's immediate from the perspective of it's our funding for 2021. So if you have $9,000 a kid and you came in 1,000 less kids than what you had anticipated, that's $9 million. And it's not like you lose $9 million. We receive like 9% a month, 6% in a few months, 5, 10 in a few. So you get a percentage each month. You receive the first 4 months of the school year, September through December, based upon what you budgeted the previous year. Then they true it up for the average as of January. And then each month's enrollment, it gets trued up for February, March, April, May, June. So there's 10 months of enrollment that we receive. So over the course of the 10 months, though, the effect of what occurred would be felt. And so what we always do, and what I've always done, is we have a pretty good idea in September, based upon what you see from enrollment in September and how it fluctuates throughout the year, what the average is going to be for the year. So in September, in a typical year, you'd have a pretty good idea of exactly what your funding, or close to what your funding is going to be. And that's one of the things that I've updated to the board every month for probably 15 years. And in Victoria, you've been there for every one of them. And I've been there with you. And so what's uncertain now is, this is why it's important that we have a program that our parents see as value and our kids see as a value, as a better option to whatever other option they may perceive. Because it's not just a question of what's in enrollment in September. That sets us for the year. It's September's enrollment, October's enrollment, November. Every month is impacted by our enrollment. And ultimately, it'll be more difficult this year in September to estimate what that average is going to be for the year, because it's a different year. Obviously, I don't think anybody's ever seen a year like the year that we're ready to move into. And that's why we had hoped that the legislature would step in and say, you're held harmless. We're going to keep your funding based upon what your enrollment was the year before. They've chosen not to do that, and they won't do that. I don't anticipate them doing that. They've got their own revenue shortfalls to deal with. And so, when they ask the question, when is it affected? It affects the 2021 school year. And when you think about a $27 million fund balance, and if you were to drop 1,000 kids, that's 9 million. You either have to find cuts of an equivalent amount somehow, or you have to dip into your reserve. That's our I've said this many times. We have never been built as a funding system in Evergreen as a bank. We don't build reserves. We're not the Columbia Bank. We have a reserve that's set at a certain number, and we spend those funds on what happens in our classrooms, in our programs, in our schools. We spend our money on our students, and I think that's widely agreed to. So we're not built for a pandemic where we've got an extra 15 million in the bank to help us out in the situation, which is why we have to work through these things pretty rapidly, and it's difficult from the perspective of transparency and the fact that we had budget forums. We had 4 budget forums. We listened to staff and community the last time we went through cuts. We then came back out, listened to them, spent some time thinking about that, then came back and had 2 more budget forums. If we take 2 months to decide what we're going to do, at that point in time, almost 25% of the school year's gone, and potential savings are gone as well. So this is why there's certain things we likely have to do before school even starts in anticipation, but we can't go too far until we actually know what those counts are. So it's this next year when that affects us.
I was looking over that fund balance policy, and to dip in, we don't build fund balance, but we do hold for fiscal responsibility. And if the worst happens, it's a good thing that we have it now. Just like the rainy day fund at the state, it's just a good thing to have. And we have a defined process for a public conversation before using the money.
Yes, we do.
That's in policy, and I know that we'll follow it if the time comes for that. But I hope not. I hope not.
Yep.
Thanks, Victoria, for noticing that question on there and making sure we got that answered for that person. Rachel, Jenny, you got anything? No? I just wanted to add that we did do our drive-through graduations this past week. We had lots of kids come out. It was an all-day event. It was fun to see some of the kids. I know that it wasn't the same, and it was later than we had hoped, but it was nice to still be able to do something for those kids and those families. And again, we just want to congratulate all of our graduates, and hope that if you came out, that you enjoyed it, and we just wish you the best. All right. Well, and then one other thing I want to say too. The whole fall planning and the budget discussions, and I know it's a lot, and we've been, it's heavy stuff, and we're going to be talking about it, as we mentioned a little bit before, that it's going to be probably every single meeting from here on out, and we're going to be making modifications, and it's fluid and stuff. And I know that it's not what some people want. I know that, it's hard on families. There's lots of variables in this, but I think we just have to kind of keep seeing the positive in everything. Know that we're doing what's best for our students, and we're going to keep working at it until we get it right, until we have the best experience possible for our students. And things may change as we move forward. It just kind of depends on if everybody keeps working together and does our part, and hopefully we get out of this sooner. And it just keep seeing the positives and things, and just stick together, and we can get through this on the better side. Okay, so future agenda items, fall planning and budget. Anything else?
I think we've got our work cut out.
Well, we still have our equity work that we're going to continue on, so that's important. So yeah, that's got to stay. We've got to stay focused on that as well. I know Clarissa will make sure we do.
That's right, because we did have our initial training, and much more to come.
Those dates are later on in later on in August. I think we got invitations or mark the calendars for the Courageous Conversations moments to take place next week. Is it next week?
17th and 18th.
Yeah, next week.
Oh, and they're the day. Okay. Wow. It's going so slow, but so fast at the same time.
It's going by fast.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Vic. Perhaps we could be ready to workshop or propose a couple of policy changes by the next board meeting. I don't know, but maybe some ideas will hit us between now and then.
Yeah, that is the work that we're going to have to do as part of this, is because we still want to write that results policy. So that's something that we'll work with under Chris's direction as we move forward with this.
I'm very anxious to get that audit report and just see what the recommendations are. And I'm sure it'll be enlightening. But that'll help direct us in the way we need to go with our policy development on that.
Exactly. I'm anxious as well.
Okay, so next up is citizen comments. At this time, if there's citizens that are wishing to speak virtually, and I believe that it's going to be the same method if there's somebody who has raised their hand. We did get somebody earlier, but they've already spoke at the earlier portion. We do have 3 written comments that I will read, but first we will take anybody who wants to raise their hand and give us a citizen comment. Just state your name and address, and keep your comments to under 3 minutes. Lori, is there anybody who's raised their hand?
Anybody? I don't see anybody at this time, Julie.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, then I'm gonna, if I can still have the proper lighting, like I did turn my light on, to read through these. Okay, there's 3 here. The first one comes from Michael Bejanaro. He writes, as essential healthcare workers, we were very much impacted by your unilateral decision to reduce school program to only virtual sessions. Our ability to continue to serve the community for coronavirus needs, testing, primary care, acute assessments, et cetera, will be very much reduced. To Mr. Merlino and Dr. Melnick and school board members, have you evaluated the impact your decision on the over 24,000 healthcare workers in Clark County, of which 80% are females? Currently, the healthcare systems serving Clark County and the Portland metro area are understaffed by 20%, which is considered an employee crisis. And based on this week assessments, we project another 20 to 30% of our current employees having to reduce hours by as much as 15 to 20 hours a week. Healthcare services in this situation might be reduced to 10 to 15% at the minimum in current conditions, where most of the immediate care clinics focused on testing for COVID-19 symptoms are understaffed, overscheduled, and providers are seeing up to 40 to 50 patients a day. Your decision that forces parents to stay home will only further reduce the healthcare support that our community needs. From your presentation, it sounds like you don't have any cleaning, sanitizing protocols set up for your schools, which is very surprising after we have been in crisis for over 6 months, with last 2 months having all your staff being on summer break. It sounds like you have made the decision for the school to be all virtual based on your teachers' unwillingness to contribute to a solution involving personal contribution and maintaining the school environment safe for our children. This is also very surprising because your school district has a large team of registered nurses, is highly educated and with expertise to provide you with guidance. Your assumption that our children will be safer at home is not taking into account the cost that we will pay from a psychological perspective: higher rates of suicide or attempts to suicide, depression, exacerbation of chronic diseases symptoms. Also from your presentation, it sounds like you don't have the masks available for your teachers, which is also a surprise after masks being made available to all organizations, business available to your teachers, which is also a surprise after masks being made available for months to organizations and businesses. To the school board members, allowing the schools to put our tired community at risk because they don't that they didn't prepare well and plan adequately is not acceptable, and we encourage you as our representatives to hold them accountable. All right, this one is from Jason Krebs, who's a Spanish teacher at Heritage High School. He writes, "Dear school board members, the purpose of my letter is to express my desire to have the option to deliver instruction from our homes during the remote learning phase of this upcoming school year. As a professional educator, I taught Spanish online for eCampus at Oregon State University for over 10 years. During that time, 100% of the instruction and delivery was done off campus. Remote learning does not require in-building delivery. It is my hope that Evergreen School District has sufficient faith in my abilities to perform my professional duties from home. I have invested in better technology, lighting, and furniture to ensure that I can deliver quality lessons from home. As a spouse and future father, I'm concerned about being required to return to a workplace that will needlessly increase my chances of contracting COVID-19. My wife is 7 months pregnant, and it is a priority of mine to keep her and my future son healthy. Having the option to access our classrooms is important. However, it should be exactly that, optional. Thank you very much for your time and attention to my letter of concern." Okay, and the next one is from Adam Aguilera, who we heard from earlier, who said he had the letter. And so now we'll go ahead and read his letter. He's also a Evergreen Public Schools teacher. To the Evergreen School Board, thank you for standing strong in deciding that distance learning is the only safe option for the start of the school year. At a time where public health has been politicized with misinformation from well-funded propaganda groups, districts are being targeted to put the lives of their community at risk by the very same individuals who want to prematurely reopen all businesses and then refuse to wear masks and social distance. Thank you for listening to concerned families, school staff, and the science that is guiding health experts. Unfortunately, at this time, educators are concerned about local superintendents sidestepping commitments to distance learning by forcing educators to return to buildings to perform their jobs, including bringing in small groups of marginalized students for support and instruction. These efforts undermine the whole point of distance learning by exposing students and staff to infect each other in facilities that are poorly ventilated and using the same common spaces such as bathrooms. For educators with children, on-site work adds new complications of childcare, potentially adding more children to school buildings who are using the same spaces and bathrooms as the adults. We also do not have guarantees that students and staff are following health guidelines to keep themselves safe outside of school. Neither do we have confidence they will follow health mandates when on site. Once again, the district is now bogging itself down in impossible logistics of reopening school facilities when precious time is being lost to focus on improving distance learning for students, staff, and their families. Furthermore, confidence in our school district is shaken when the Evergreen superintendent is one of the 4 Clark County superintendents signing onto a letter asking Governor Inslee for liability protections if students and staff are infected with COVID-19. How are we supposed to trust the school district to force us back into buildings when the superintendent is currently asking Governor Inslee for protections from liability to their own reopening plans? I can express to you with confidence that a majority of Evergreen educators will not accept anything less than a safe return to distance learning off-site. I've received continuous messages from concerned colleagues who felt relief, then betrayal after learning the district is more concerned about micromanaging them than trusting them in a pandemic, where all of us are traumatized, unwell, and struggling to adapt. Where is the compassion and inspiration to make us feel like a family, that we are all in this together? We have a federal government that spends every day actively sabotaging state and local efforts to contain this virus. We have state leadership that waits until after their primaries to recommend toothless recommendations for reopening. There's no funding coming from our legislators who can't even agree on new revenue because they are controlled by fortune-making billionaires, while our Evergreen families have lost their unemployment benefits, face evictions, and thousands of dollars in debt. In the end, we can only trust and rely on each other to survive this pandemic and economic collapse together. We are all we have, so let's trust and keep each other safe to create the best school year we can for our Evergreen families. Okay, those were the 3 citizen comments that were emailed in earlier before the cutoff time. Lori, can you remind me again what the cutoff time was? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, it was 12 o'clock.
12 o'clock today. All right. Okay, so
Julie,
And just to
there,
remind everyone that we cannot respond necessarily to the citizen comments that come in because they weren't part of our agenda. Rob, did you have something to say?
there are 8 comments left in the Q&A section. Maybe we could read them aloud and then include them in the public comments.
Do you want to do it, Rob?
Sure. This first one has to do with layoffs. Heather Graven writes, if I was medically exempt in the fall, would that be protection from layoff in the spring? Which sounds like something to hand over to Mike to take care of. Anonymous attendee writes, Victoria Bradford, thank you so much for saying that out loud. Thank you, Ginny. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Julie. You did amazing with this meeting. Melissa is super worried about all the SPED kids. My 2 cannot learn remotely. Who and when determines which kids get selected to go in person? And the last 2 read from Gianna Wright Smith. Thank you for recognizing the movement and reality of the need for equity in addressing BLM. And a final anonymous attendee comment that says, thank you for all the work you do. I really appreciate hearing those expressions of thanks from people.
All right, thanks, Rob. Okay, so with that, the board will now go into a recess. We are going to reconvene for an executive session where we will discuss the performance of a public employee. So at this time, we will go into a recess. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening and bearing with us for the long meeting. I appreciate everybody's hard work. Thank you.